Welcome, brave souls, to a journey through the shadows of Pennsylvania. Among rolling hills, dense forests, and misty valleys stand ancient castles and grand estates, monuments of power, wealth, and ambition. But behind their stone walls lie secrets that time could not bury. Tonight, we will wander through 25 of Pennsylvania's most haunted castles and estate homes, where restless spirits roam the corridors, whispered voices echo through abandoned halls, and the dark legacies of colonial ambition linger in every shadow. Step carefully, for the past is alive, and some secrets refuse to rest. Nemacolin Castle, also known as Bowmana Castle, stands on a hill overlooking the Monongahela River in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, a massive brick structure that has watched over the town since the days of the French and Indian War. Built near the old site of Fort Byrd, the castle carries centuries of history within its walls. But with that history comes something else: whispers of spirits, lingering shadows, and the unsettling feeling that some part of the past never truly left. People who visit the castle often describe the same sensation the moment they step inside. The air grows heavier, as though Thea crossed a threshold into another time. The wooden floors groan softly beneath their feet, not just from age, but as if someone upstairs is shifting their weight, listening. Light flickers along the staircase, even when the bulbs are steady. It is a place where silence feels alive, where every hallway seems to breathe. One of the most commonly reported phenomena in Nemacolin Castle is the sound of ghostly footsteps echoing across the upper floors. Volunteers who help run the museum talk about hearing boots on the stairs long after closing, long after the last visitor has gone. The sound is so clear that many have rushed to investigate, expecting to find an intruder. But each time, the rooms are empty. The footsteps simply stop, leaving nothing but the faint echo reverberating through the hall. Shadowy figures are seen especially near the old servants' quarters, and in the long, narrow hallway that runs along the top floor. Visitors describe the same thing again and again, a dark silhouette crossing from one room to another, quick but distinct, as though a person were still doing their daily chores. Some even say the shadows pause, as if looking directly at them, before melting back into the darkness. For many, this is the moment they realize the castle is more than just a historical landmark, it is a place of restless memory. Part of Nemacolin Castle's mystery lies beneath it. Hidden passages snake under the building, remnants of tunnels once used to shelter runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad. These tunnels served as places of hope, hiding frightened families who risked everything for a chance at freedom. But they were also dangerous spaces filled with fear, uncertainty, and silence that stretched for hours as fugitives waited for nightfall. Some believe those emotions never left. Visitors who venture near the tunnel entrances say they feel sudden chills, even in the heat of summer. Others report hearing faint whispers echoing from the stone wall, so a soft murmur, as if several voices are speaking at once but cannot be understood. A few have even claimed to see shapes moving within the darkness, figures that do not step into the light but remain just beyond sight. These experiences have led many to wonder whether the souls who once hid there still linger, bound to the place where they found both refuge and terror. One volunteer tells a story of locking up the castle one evening. As she descended the stairs toward the lower level, she heard what sounded like soft crying coming from the direction of the old tunnels. Thinking someone might have been left behind, she followed the sound, calling out into the dim corridors. But the deeper she went, the quieter the crying became, fading until it vanished entirely. When she turned to go back upstairs, she felt a gentle tug at the hem of her coat, as if a small hand were trying to keep her from leaving. She fled without looking back. The Castle's main dining room holds its own spectral secrets. People have reported catching glimpses of a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, seated at the head of the table. He appears only for a moment, head bowed, hands folded before disappearing into nothingness. Some say he is one of the early Bowman family members, still watching over his home long after his death. Others believe he is a remnant of a time when the castle served as a gathering place for military officers and community leaders during turbulent periods of American history. The tower room, with its narrow windows overlooking the river, is said to be one of the most active rooms in the castle. Many who have visited the room describe the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Cameras malfunction, batteries drain instantly, and the air feels several degrees colder than the rest of the building. A few paranormal investigators have reported seeing a figure standing near the window, staring out at the river below. When they approach, the figure fades into thin air, leaving only a cold draft swirling through the room. Despite the unsettling activity, there is a quiet dignity to Namaqualand Castle. Its spirits do not seem malevolent, only persistent echoes of a long, complicated past that refuse to dissolve entirely. The castle has stood as a witness to wars, family legacies, hidden struggles for freedom, and the passage of countless generations. Each of these moments left an imprint, a memory etched into the bricks and wooden beams. Today, visitors walk through its halls to glimpse history, but many come away with something more. They speak of chills that cannot be explained, of shadows that move on their own, of soft footsteps trailing behind them. Some describe feeling sadness near the tunnels, as though the walls themselves are remembering the fear and hope of those who once passed through. Others leave with a profound sense of connection, believing the spirits of Namaqualand Castle are not trapida, but simply unwilling to be forgotten. In Brownsville, stories of the Castle's hauntings continue to circulate, shared among residents and visitors alike. And as long as the structure stands on its hill overlooking the river, those whispers of the past will continue to echo through its halls, reminding all who enter that some histories refuse to fade quietly into time. Its turrets, carved stone, and sweeping arches giving it a presence both beautiful and unsettling, passing under the shadow of its history, and later absorbed into the university grounds. And according to those who have spent time there after dark. Inside, the castle's architecture is breathtaking. Grand staircases curling upward, ornate fireplaces framed with carved beasts and floral motifs, and hallways lined with mirrors that have watched generations come and go. But for all its elegance, there is an unmistakable chill that lingers through the upper floors. Students who take evening classes in the building often speak of feeling watched, as though the castle itself is keeping track of their movements. Some describe the air suddenly growing heavier, the silence tightening around them like a held breath. One of the most unsettling features of Grey Tower's castle is its collection of aging mirrors. They hang in hallways and rooms, their surfaces dulled by time, their frames ornate and imposing. Over the years, countless students and staff have reported seeing strange reflections in thema faces where there should be none, shadows drifting across the glass even when the hallway behind them is empty. One student described glancing into a mirror between classes and seeing a woman standing just over her shoulder. The woman wore clothing from another century, her expression sorrowful. When the student spun around, the hallway was empty, but the reflection lingered for a split second before fading like mist. Another story comes from a maintenance worker who stayed late to fix an electrical issue. While passing through one of the long upper corridors, he noticed a tall mirror cracked from corner to corner. As he walked by, he caught sight of several figures moving in the reflection, but when he turned to face the hallway directly, there was no one there. The figures continued to move only in the mirror, gliding silently, dressed in what looked like morning attire. Their faces were blurred, their movements slow, as though trapped in an endless replay of grief. Shadows, too, seemed to have a life of their own inside the castle. Late at night, campus security officers patrolling the halls report seeing shapes dart across the upper corridors. These shadows move quickly, as if running from something or towards something unseen. Some linger at doorways, stretching unnaturally long across the floor before dissolving into the darkness. Officers often try to track the sources of these shadows, shining flashlights into empty rooms, but they never find anyone. Many believe these shadows are echoes of the tragedies that struck the family who once owned the castle. There are whispered stories of loss, of loved ones taken suddenly, of sorrows that echoed through the grand halls long before the university acquired the estate. Though the full history is not always spoken aloud, the energy it left behind is unmistakable. Visitors often describe feeling a heavy sadness in certain rooms, as though stepping into someone else's grief. One professor recalls staying late to finish grading papers. The building was quiet, nearly empty, when he heard footsteps overhead, a slow, dragging steps moving back and forth. Knowing that no classes were held on the top floor that late, he went upstairs to check. As he reached the landing, the sound stopped abruptly. The corridor ahead was dark, but as he took a few steps forward, he saw a shadow stretch across the wall, long and unmistakably human. It drifted steadily down the hall, even though no source stood before it. When he followed, the shadow turned a corner and vanished, leaving only cold air behind. There is also a well-known story among students about the music room on the second floor. Occasionally, late at night, faint piano notes drift from the room, soft and melancholy. When someone opens the door, the piano stands silent, its lid closed, the air still. Campus staff have checked for loose strings or mechanical faults, but everything appears normal. Some believe it is the ghost of a former resident who once played there, returning to the instrument that brought them comfort. Others think the music is tied to one of the family tragedies, perhaps the echo of a final melody that once filled the castle with sorrow. Despite the eerie occurrences, Grey Towers Castle remains a beloved part of the university campus. Its beauty is undeniable, its history rich, and its atmosphere unforgettable. Students take photos in front of it, attend classes within its walls, and marvel at its architecture during campus tours. But those who know the stories look at the castle differently. They see the small movements in darkened windows, the flicker of a reflection that does not match the room, the shadows that glide silently through the corridors. Grey Towers Castle is more than just a landmark. It is a place where the past and present coexist in a delicate balance, where memories cling to stone and glass, refusing to fade. The spirits that dwell within seem to be bound not by malice, but by sorrow. Forever walking the halls, forever watching, forever replaying the stories that shaped the castle's history. For anyone who steps inside, especially at night, the castle offers a reminder that beauty and tragedy often share the same space. And in Grey Towers, the echoes of long-ago grief still move through the corridors. Visible only in the flicker of a mirror or the shifting of a shadow that slips away before you can truly see it. Fonthill Castle in Doylestown stands like a dream pulled from another world, a sprawling concrete labyrinth crafted by the brilliant and eccentric Henry Chapman Mercer. With 44 rooms, endless corridors, and more than 18,000 handmade tiles embedded into its walls and floors. The castle feels less like a historic home and more like a living Minda Mercer's imagination frozen in stone. But beneath the beauty and craftsmanship lies an aura of mystery that visitors have felt for decades. At night, the castle becomes something else entirely, a place where footsteps echo down empty halls and the mosaic eyes embedded in the walls seem to watch every passing visitor. Mercer built the castle using poured concrete, creating a structure that feels both fortress-like and strangely organic. Against the Pennsylvania sky, its turrets and sweeping arches cast long shadows that shift with the light, giving the impression that the building itself moves. Inside, the rooms twist and rise in unexpected ways, ceilings soar overhead, and staircases lead to hidden nooks. The result is a maze filled with artistria tiles depicting mythology, ancient civilizations, and forgotten folklore scattered across nearly every surface. It is a place meant to inspire awe, but for many who enter, it also stirs an inexplicable unease. One of the most common reports from visitors is the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls, even when they are completely alone. The long corridors amplify every sound, but these steps often come from above or behind, sometimes moving swiftly, sometimes pacing slowly as if someone is wandering aimlessly in search of something lost. Tour guides who lock up at night speak of hearing these footsteps when the castle has been empty for hours. They describe the rhythmic tap of shoes on the tile floors, followed by a soft pause, as though the unseen walker is stopping to listen. When they investigate, the halls stretch out in silence, undisturbed and still. In certain rooms, particularly those filled with Mercer's most vivid tile work, the atmosphere feels charged. From biblical scenes to medieval hunts, from dragons to star patterns, from mythic heroes to ancient ruins. Many visitors swear that some of the tiles seem to shift when looked at from the corner of the eye. But the most unsettling are the mosaic facisa eyes crafted from colored stone and clay, set into walls, arches, and columns. These eyes were meant to tell stories, each one part of a larger narrative Mercer preserved through his art. But at night, especially during the quietest hours, people report feeling those eyes tracking them. Shadows stretch strangely across the tiles, causing the eyes to appear alive, glinting with some hidden awareness. Some visitors say that when they turn away, they hear a faint whisper, as though the figures frozen in clay are murmuring forgotten secrets. A few claim to have heard their own names drift through the room, whispered with a breath that feels too close, too deliberate to be the wind. One caretaker shared an experience that has become a well-known tale among staff. Late one evening, while shutting down the upper floors, he walked into a long hallway lined with tile murals. As he passed a series of faces, he felt compelled to glance back over his shoulder. In the shifting light, he swore one of the mosaic eyes blinked. Not a flicker, not a trick of the light, an unmistakable blink. Startled, he turned fully around. But the image lay still again, lifeless and unchanging. He finished closing the castle in silence. But he never forgot that moment. Another story comes from a visitor who attended an evening lantern tour. As the group paused in one of the castle's high-ceilinged rooms, she drifted toward a mosaic of a hunting scene. She reached out to trace the outline of one of the tiles when she heard a whisper right beside her ear. The voice spoke only one word: "A waita." She pulled her hand back immediately and stepped away from the wall. No one was standing close enough to have whispered. The guide insisted it was only an echo. But the visitor left the castle with the overwhelming sense that something within the walls had spoken to her directly. Even the architectural design seems to contribute to the supernatural atmosphere. The castle's winding staircases often create pockets of cold air, abrupt temperature drops that many interpret as more than simple drafts. Doors sometimes swing shut with soft thuds, though the building has no central ventilation system strong enough to move them. Lights flicker in rooms where wiring has already been replaced, and shadows gather in corners where no light should be obstructed. Some believe these manifestations come from Mercer himself, an artist so devoted to his craft that he could not bear to leave it behind. Others think the castle functions as a vessel for the stories depicted in its tiles, echoes of ancient myths and forgotten histories, surfacing in strange, unexplainable ways. The castle's atmosphere changes, depending on who walks through it. Some feel inspired, some uneasy, some deeply watched. During the day, Fonthill Castle is a place of wonder, a testament to Mercer's boundless creativity. But once the sun sets, the structure shifts into something older, stranger, and vividly alive. Footsteps sound in distant rooms, whispers drift from the mosaic-covered walls, and the stone eyes seem to follow every curious traveler who dares to explore its depths. In Doylestown, people speak of the castle not just as a museum, but as a living relica, a place where stories and spirits intertwine. And for those who visit after dark, Fonthill Castle proves that some creations hold far more than artistry. They hold memories, voices, and the lingering presence of a man who built his dreams into stone, leaving behind a world that continues to watch, whisper, and remember. Glencairn Castle in Bryn Athyn stands like a sacred monument carved from stone, towering with Gothic splendor and crowned with a commanding tower that watches over the quiet landscape below. Built by the wealthy Pitcairn family in the early 20th century, the estate was meant to embody their deep devotion to faith, art, and spirituality. Today it houses one of the most impressive collections of religious art in the region's stained glass that glows like embers, ancient carvings, medieval tapestries, and relics from distant centuries. But visitors quickly learn that the castle holds more than just beauty. It holds echoes of long-lost rituals, spectral whispers, and shadows that move with unexplainable purpose. Stepping inside Glencairn, one is struck by the overwhelming detail. Vaulted ceilings arch above like stone ribs, and hallways stretch endlessly, lit by shafts of colored light spilling from stained glass windows. The atmosphere is reverent, almost church-like, yet beneath the surface lies something colder. Visitors often report a sudden chill when entering certain rooms, a cold spot so sharp and unmistakable that it stops them in their tracks. Guides insist there is no draft, no faulty vents, no structural explanation. The temperature simply drops as though someone unseen is passing by. These cold spots are most often felt near the chapel room, a space filled with centuries-old religious artifacts. Here, the air feels heavy, as though thick with memories. Some claim to hear faint Shantinga soft voices blending together in tones that don't match any known language. The sound drifts through the room like a forgotten prayer lingering long after the ritual has ended. When the listener turns to find its source, the room stands quiet, save for the glow of the stained glass watching silently from the walls. Shadows are another common presence in Glencairn Castle. They flicker along the staircases, slip across the sandstone hallways, and hover in the corners of rooms filled with sacred art. Many visitors describe the same unnerving sight, a shadow moving independently of any person or object, gliding slowly along the walls. Sometimes the shadows appear to belong to figuresa tall forms, hooded shapes, or silhouettes that stretch unnaturally long before suddenly evaporating. One staff member reported seeing a shadow run up the grand staircase late at night, swift and silent, though no one else was in the building. When he followed, the upper hall was empty, cold, and strangely still. Whispers, too, seem woven into the Castlia-S stone. They drift through hallways during quiet hours and slip between the arches of the upper floors. Most describe them as soft murmurs, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. Others hear their names whispered clearly, the voice so close it feels like breath on the back of the neck. One student visiting for a research project recalled setting her notebook down in a gallery room. As she bent to tie her shoe, she heard a voice whisper directly into her ear. "Look deeper." She stood up quickly, but the gallery was empty. She left the room feeling watched from every angle, as though dozens of unseen eyes were judging her presence. Part of Glencairn's haunted reputation stems from the hidden crypts beneath the estate. Built as part of the Pitcairn Familia's private spiritual practices, these underground spaces were rarely seen by outsiders. The crypts were used for quiet meditation, private rituals, and symbolic ceremonies intended to foster spiritual enlightenment. Over the years, the crypts gained an eerie reputation both for their architectural beauty and for the strange sensations people feel when inside them. Those who have entered the crypts describe an overwhelming pressure, as though the air grows thicker with every step. The walls seem to absorb sound, turning every footstep into a dull thud. Some say they feel watched from the darkness, just beyond the lantern light, while others claim to see ghostly forms lingering near the stone altarsa figures robed in long garments, faces indistinct. A few believe these echoes are not spirits in the traditional sense, but imprints of rituals long forgotten, looping endlessly like shadows of the past. One of the most chilling stories involves a guide who was closing the crypt area after a private tour. As she turned to leave, she heard the unmistakable sound of stone scraping against stone, like a heavy slab being moved. Thinking someone was still inside, she went back to check, but the chamber was empty. When she reached the entrance, she felt a sharp burst of cold, followed by a low whisper that seemed to come from directly behind Hera, even though no one stood there. She shut the crypt for the night and refused to go in alone again. Even above ground, the Castlia-S collection of religious artifacts seems to hold its own power. Some visitors report feeling drawn to certain statues or mosaics, as though the pieces themselves are trying to communicate. Others feel a sense of dread, like Thea V intruded upon something sacred. There are tales of figures appearing in the reflections of the stained glass windowsa, faces not present in the artwork, watching silently from the shimmering colors. Despite the supernatural tales, Glencairn Castle remains a place of astonishing beauty and cultural significance. Yet those who wander its halls after dark often leave with the sense that they have walked among more than just history. Cold spots follow their steps, shadows slide just beyond sight, and ancient whispers drift from rooms filled with spiritual relics. The hidden crypts breathe with the echoes of rituals lost to time, and the entire castle seems alive with memories too powerful to fade. For many, Glencairn is a sanctuary of art and faith. For others, it is a threshold between the physical world and something far aldera. Something that watches, whispers, and waits in the dim corridors of this Gothic estate. Lindenwold Castle in Ambler stands as a haunting reminder of the past, its stone walls and tall windows holding memories that refuse to fade. Once the grand mansion of a wealthy industrialist, the castle later became an orphanagia, a place filled with young lives, laughter, loss, and longing. A place filled with young lives, laughter, loss, and longing. Today, the building sits quietly behind its gates, surrounded by sprawling grounds and the echo of stories that never left. and the echo of stories that never left. Visitors who walk its corridors speak of strange sensations, unexplained sounds, and fleeting shadows that dart between forgotten rooms. Unexplained sounds and fleeting shadows that dart between forgotten rooms. The sorrow of the past seems woven into every corner. The estate's early years were filled with luxury. The original owner designed Lindenwold Castle as a monument to success, filling it with ornate staircases, hand-carved fireplaces, and towering ceilings. The rooms glowed with polished wood and sunlight pouring through stained glass. But everything changed when the mansion transformed into an orphanage. Dozens of children filled the halls where wealthy guests once gathered. Their small footsteps, laughter, and tears reshaped the atmosphere, creating layers of emotion that settled deep into the building's bones. Many believe that the spirits of those children still linger. Visitors often report hearing laughter drifting from empty rooms, soft giggles, playful and bright, echoing through the halls as though games continue long after the players are gone. Sometimes the laughter shifts into something else, something colder, the unmistakable sound of a child crying. The cries echo down the stairwells or seep from closed doors, growing louder with each step until the moment the door is opened. Then the sound stops, leaving only silence and a heavy stillness behind. One of the most unsettling areas in Lindenwold Castle is a small room that once stored toys. Old wooden blocks, a faded rocking horse, and a collection of dolls remain as quiet reminders of the children who lived there long ago. Visitors stepping into this room often feel an immediate chill, as though the temperature drops several degrees the moment the door opens. Some report the faint sound of something moving, blocks shifting, a soft tap-tap-tap against the wooden floor, or the gentle creak of the rocking horse swaying even when the air is still. Several eyewitnesses have described seeing small shadows dart between the toys. These figures appear only for a split second, like children peeking out to watch before disappearing again. One man who toured the castle late in the evening said he saw a tiny silhouette standing near the rocking horse. When he blinked, it vanished, leaving only the faint scent of old wooden dust and a feeling that someone small had been watching him quietly. The castle's main staircase is another hotspot for strange encounters. Caretakers closing the building for the night often hear the unmistakable patter of little footsteps running up or down the stairs. Sometimes the steps stop suddenly, as though someone is standing just out of sight waiting. One caretaker recalls hearing footsteps rush down the staircase toward him. Expecting a child who had wandered away from a tour, he stepped aside to let them pass. But no one appeared. Instead, a cold breeze brushed against his leg, like something small and unseen had run right past him. Some believe the sorrow trapped in Lindenwold Castle comes from the sheer number of children who passed through its doors. Many orphans arrived with stories of hardship and loss, and although the staff cared for them, the walls could not help but absorb their grief. Visitors often speak of an overwhelming sadness in certain hallways, a feeling so thick it settles into their chest. Even those who don't believe in ghosts admit the mansion carries emotions that feel almost human. One former volunteer, who worked in the orphanage years before it closed, once returned to the castle for a historical tour. As she walked through the old dining hall, she felt the air grow strangely warm, as though wrapped in a memory. She heard faint clattering of silverware tapping plates, chairs shifting, and Childrena's voices blending into the soft hum of mealtime chatter. When she turned, the room stood empty, dust collecting in the corners, the long tables still. She left the castle in tears, convinced the children she once cared for were still gathered around her, just out of sight. Some of the most chilling experiences come from the castle's attic, where personal belongings of the orphans were once stored. Visitors who climb the narrow staircase report feeling watched from the moment they reach the top. The air is thick with dust, and shafts of light filter through the small windows. In the shadows, people claim to see tiny figures standing near old trunks or tucked behind forgotten furniture. One person described seeing a small handprint appear on a dusty windowpane, even though no children were anywhere near the room. Despite these supernatural experiences, Lindenwold Castle remains a place of profound emotion rather than terror. The spirits that linger seem more sorrowful than malicious. Children seeking comfort, attention, or simply the chance to be remembered. The Castle's long history as both a mansion and an orphanage has created layers of life and loss that still breathe through its walls. For those who visit, Lindenwold Castle offers more than just history. It offers a glimpse into the echoes of childhoods long gone, the whispers of laughter and tears, and the sense that even in silence, the past continues to move gently through the halls. The fleeting shadows, the phantom footsteps, and the soft cries remind every visitor that the children who once called the castle home may still be there, lingering with stories that have never fully faded. Castle Blood in Monessen stands as one of the region's most unforgettable Gothic structures, a brooding mansion with pointed arches, looming towers, and narrow windows that seem to stare back at visitors. Today it is known as a haunted attraction, but its past is far darker than theatrics or staged scares. Long before the costumes and props, this building served as a funeral home, a place where final goodbyes were spoken, where grief settled into the walls, and where the air grew thick with sorrow. Beneath the main floor lies the old chapel basement, a space that still hums with an unsettling energy. Visitors who venture down there speak of footsteps that echo in empty rooms, whispers that circle them like restless spirits, and the eerie sensation of unseen hands brushing past their skin. Whispers that circle them like restless spirits, and the eerie sensation of unseen hands brushing past their skin. The eerie sensation of unseen hands brushing past their skin. From the outside, Castle Blood carries an atmosphere of quiet dread, its castle-like FAA section Ade rising over the street. Weathered stone and dark would hint at decades of historia, decades filled with mourning, rituals, and families who walked through its doors carrying their deepest grief. Decades filled with mourning, rituals, and families who walked through its doors carrying their deepest grief. Even after its transformation into a themed attraction, staff and visitors alike claim the building's original purpose refuses to let go. Some areas feel heavy, as if the emotions of countless funerals still linger in the corners. This was once the room where bodies were prepared and where loved ones gathered for final viewings. Today, the space is dimly lit, with old archways and low ceilings that amplify every sound. Those who enter describe an immediate shift in atmosphere. The air grows colder, heavier. It feels as though someone or something is watching from the shadows. Footsteps are one of the most commonly reported phenomena. They echo across the concrete floor, slow and deliberate, often approaching from behind. Visitors frequently turn around expecting to find another person, only to discover the room is empty. Staff members who close the building late at night have grown accustomed to hearing footsteps in rooms they just left. Some say the steps follow them, pacing a few feet behind before stopping abruptly, as if the presence is unsure whether to reveal itself. One employee recounted a night alone in the basement, organizing props after an event. As he moved from one corner to another, he heard a set of footsteps walking parallel to his own. When he stopped, the footsteps continued for several seconds, then halted with a soft scrape, as if someone had shifted their weight. He shined his flashlight toward the sound, but the beam cut across nothing but empty space. The only thing he felt was a cold draft moving past his arm. Many visitors say they hear murmurs drifting through the halls, soft voices overlapping like fragments of conversations. Sometimes the whispers seem to come from within the walls, sometimes from just behind the listener's shoulder. The words are rarely clear, but the tone is unmistakably urgent, sorrowful, or pleading. One guest described hearing her name spoken in a low voice while she stood alone near the chapel door. The voice was so close she felt breath on her ear, but no one was there. There is also the unsettling sensation of being touched. People report feeling fingers brush against their hands, clothing tug slightly, or a cold palm pressed gently against their back. One visitor touring the basement felt something tap her shoulder. When she turned, she saw only the dim lights flickering overhead. Seconds later, she felt a soft, icy hand slide down her arm, sending her running up the stairs. Another chilling story comes from a volunteer who stayed in the building after hours. While walking down the main hall toward the basement door, she felt someone grip her wrist, firm enough to stop her mid-step. When she looked down, her sleeve was indented as though a hand were still wrapped around Ida. But no one stood beside her. She described the sensation as neither aggressive nor comforting, but sorrowful, like someone reaching out for help. though the basement holds the strongest hauntings. The rest of Castle Blood is far from silent. Shadows move quickly across doorways, often seen only in peripheral vision. Lights flicker in patterns that defy logical explanation. Doors open just enough to catch attention, then close again as if pushed by an unseen force. Visitors walking up the narrow staircases sometimes feel a sudden rush of cold wind, even when all windows are shut. Some believe the spirits here are tied to the Buildinga's history. Families who mourned may have left fragments of their grief behind. Embalmers and funeral attendants who worked long, emotionally heavy hours may linger in spirit. And perhaps some of the departed, unprepared to leave the mortal world, remain in the place where their final earthly rituals occurred. Others think the constant stream of visitors, emotional reactions, and dark storytelling may stir old energies, keeping them active. The footsteps respond. The whispers feel intentional. The touches seem curious, desperate, or longing. Yet for all its fear and mystery, the building does not radiate pure malevolence. Instead, it feels trapped in its own pasta, haunted by sorrow, grief, and memories of final farewells. The spirits that linger seem more mournful than malicious, bound to the place where their stories ended and unable to fully move on. Castle Blood remains a living testament to the weight of history. Those who enter walk not only into a theatrical attraction, but into a space where echoes of real sorrow drift through the halls. Footsteps follow, whispers surround, and unseen hands reach out from the darkness, reminding every visitor that some souls never completely leave the places where their final moments were shared. Stokesay Castle-style home in Pennsylvania stands like a misplaced fragment of medieval England, its stone walls and towering parapets rising from the quiet landscape with an authority that seems older than the nation itself. Modeled after the original Stokesay Castle in Shropshire, this American counterpart carries an air of romance and tragedy that settles into the stones like a long-held breath. Visitors describe feeling watched the moment they step onto the grounds, as though unseen eyes from centuries past still linger in the shadows, waiting for their stories to be told. The home was built by a wealthy businessman in the early 20th century, a man obsessed with English architecture and enamored with the stories of knights, hidden courtships, and secret vows. For years, he worked tirelessly to recreate the medieval dream he believed he had been born for, and when the estate was completed, he filled it with imported tapestries, carved wooden furniture, and winding stone corridors that echoed with the cool stillness of 1,000 years. But beneath the beauty and grandeur was a secreta, one that would shape the estate's future and stain it with an energy that still ripples through the walls. According to local legend, the owner fell deeply in love with a young woman far beneath his social standing. She was an artist hired to paint delicate murals along the interior corridors, capturing scenes of English folklore and ancient myth. The two shared stolen moments among the scaffolding, whispering their devotion in the dim glow of lantern light. But their love was forbidden, scorned by the Manna's family, who believed he was tarnishing their legacy by courting someone of humble means. Rumors spread of heated arguments echoing through the halls and of the young artist being banned from the estate altogether. What happened next varies depending on who tells the tale. Some whisper that the woman disappeared after the quarrel, vanishing from town without a trace. Others claim she was last seen walking toward the estate late one evening, clutching a letter that would never be found. Whatever the truth, the owner fell into sudden despair, shutting himself inside the castle home, where he walked the stone passages alone for years, until his own death. Since then the walls have never fully settled. The air seems to hum with unfinished stories, and visitors say the tragedy never left. At night, shadows often move across the parapets, even when no one is there. Dark figures are seen pacing along the upper walkways. Visitors sometimes freeze, thinking they have spotted a security guard or caretaker, only to realize the shape melts away the second they blink. Tour guides claim the shadow on the highest tower appears most often near dusk, pacing back and forth as though waiting for someone who never arrived. Inside the stone corridors, the atmosphere grows heavier. Hallways remain unnaturally cold even in the height of summer, and the smell of old stone and fading perfume lingers in the air. Those who walk the corridors alone often hear soft footsteps following closely behind, or the faint rustle of a dress brushing the floor. Some have felt a sudden warmth near the muralsa, the very ones painted by the lost artista, as though someone stands there, admiring the work she never finished. The room where the owner once slept is one of the most active. Lights flicker without explanation, and visitors sometimes hear muffled sobs behind the walls. A few have reported seeing a woman-esque figure standing near the window, her head bowed, her hands clasped in sorrow. She appears only for a moment before fading into the stone as though swallowed by it. Staff believe she is the spirit of the artist, still wandering the place where she once poured her heart into her work. Stranger still are the voices heard in the Great Hall. Late at night, when the estate is empty and locked, neighbors have claimed they hear two people arguing inside, their words muffled but intense, rising and falling in waves of anguish. Others hear soft singing drifting through open windows, even though no one is inside. The sounds always stop abruptly, as if snatched away by an unseen hand. Those who venture into the lower corridors describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched. The stone walls seem to absorb every sound, amplifying each footstep into a hollow echo that feels like it comes from somewhere just behind you. Visitors often leave abruptly, convinced they are not walking alone. Some swear Thea V heard a whisper carried on the cold air, a single word like a warning or a plea. To this day, the Stokesay Castle-style home remains one of Pennsylvania's most mysterious estates. Its stone towers rise against the sky with solemn beauty. But within the walls lies a story of love that defied status, betrayal that broke hearts, and spirits that still linger in the places where promises were made and never kept. The shadows continue to move. The whispers still drift through the corridors. And those who wander its halls can feel unmistakably that the past has never truly left. Beneath Nemacolin Castle in Brownsville lies a hidden world, one few visitors ever glimpse and even fewer truly understand. The castle above is already a place of whispers and wandering figures. But the tunnel beneath it holds something deeper, an imprint of lives lived on the edge of terror and hope. The echoes of a time when danger, desperation, and courage intertwined in the shadows. Beneath Nemacolin Castle in Brownsville lies a hidden world, one few visitors ever glimpse and even fewer truly understand. The passageway, originally built as a hidden route for the Bowman family, became something far more profound during the years leading up to the Civil War. As the Underground Railroad stretched across the country, this tunnel served as refuge for escaped slaves fleeing toward freedom. In the cold earth beneath the grand rooms and candlelit halls, men, women, and children hid in silence, clutching one another in fear as they waited for the right moment to move. For many, this narrow, dim corridor was the last barrier between bondage and liberation. Time has long since passed, but the tunnel remembers. Modern visitors who venture below the castle describe a sudden drop in temperature, a stillness so complete it feels like stepping into a sealed pocket of the past. The air is thick with damp earth and old stone, and every sound seems too loud, too sharp. Your own breath, the scrape of shoes on uneven ground, the distant drip of moisture somewhere in the dark. But then, beneath those natural noises, something else stirs. Footsteps. Soft, hurried, uneven. They echo faintly through the passageway, even when no one else is there. Some say the footsteps sound barefoot, others swear they sound like the quick tread of leather shoes worn thin from miles of running. Visitors often stop in place, straining to hear, feeling a presence move past them in the dark, as though someone is slipping silently by on their way toward salvation. Whispers follow soon after. Low, urgent murmurs drift through the tunnel like trapped breath. A few catch fragments of pleas, warnings, prayers, while others hear nothing more than a rustling voice that fades before they can understand it. Guides who have worked in the castle for years claim the whispers come most often near the narrowest points of the passage, where escaping slaves once pressed themselves against the wall, praying not to be discovered. One former caretaker recounted hearing a woman's voice clearly one evening as he locked up the lower level. She whispered a single word. A hurried when he looked down the tunnel, no one stood there. Some visitors feel something even more tangibly, unseen hands brushing lightly against their shoulders or backs, as though guiding them forward. These touches are gentle, but unmistakable. A reassurance, a silent reminder of the hope that once filled the space, even in its darkest hours. Yet not all sensations are comforting. Others report a sudden and overwhelming feeling of dread, as if the tunnel itself is replaying moments of fear felt by those who once hid within its walls. There are also shadows, in the faint glow of the lanterns used on tours. Long silhouettes are sometimes seen darting across the corridor, moving quickly from one side to the other. Tour guides often dismiss it as tricks of the light, but the guests insist they saw figuresa thin, hunched, desperate forms scrambling deeper into the darkness as though trying to remain unseen. One group claimed to see a tall shadow linger at the far end of the tunnel, unmoving, watching them silently until their lantern flickered. When the light steadied, the figure was gone. The most chilling encounters often happen near the old stone alcove, believed to have been a resting space for escapees. Visitors who stand there too long sometimes hear rhythmic breathing, not their own, drifting from beside them. Others sense bodies crowded close in the dark, an invisible group huddled together, waiting for danger to pass. Some leave the tunnel in tears, overwhelmed by emotions they cannot explain, an unexpected sorrow, a rising panic, or a deep, aching empathy that settles into their bones. Despite the fear, many people describe a powerful sense of reverence in the passageway. The tunnel is not just haunted, it is sacred. Every whisper, every shadow, every ghostly footstep seems to carry a story of endurance. These spirits do not linger out of malice or unrest, but out of remembrance. They are echoes of journeys taken in silence, of lives risking everything for freedom. Their presence is a reminder of the strength and suffering that shaped the hidden history beneath Namaqualand Castle. Even today, those who emerge from Bomena's underground tunnel often feel changed. The world above seems louder, brighter, too modern to hold the weight of what lies below. Many pause at the tunnel's entrance before leaving, feeling as though unseen eyes are watching from the darkness, eyes filled with hope, fear, and the determination to survive. And in those moments, the past and present blend, the spirits walking alongside the living, their footsteps forever echoing through the stone passageways beneath the castle, the walls below the castle, walls beneath the stone passageways 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 below. High above the quiet grounds of gray towers, in a secluded room few dare to enter, hangs the mirror of betrayal. Its glass is cracked in a jagged spiderweb pattern, as though something once struck it with desperate force. A faint tarnish dulls its edges, and the ornate framea carved with twisting vines and strange, sorrowful faceta seems almost alive in the dim light. The mirror has been part of the mansion for as long as anyone can remember, surviving fires, renovations, and the slow decay of time. But those who know its history prefer to leave it untouched, for its reflection does not always show the present. The story begins in the earliest days of Grey Towers, when the estate was still a private home, owned by a wealthy family whose reputation was built on impeccable appearance and ruthless ambition. Behind closed doors, however, jealousy, manipulation, and whispered secrets simmered beneath the polished surface. And the servants, who moved silently through the halls, witnessed far more than they ever spoke of. And the mirror on the top floor, once a prized ornament imported from Europea, absorbed every moment. According to legend, the mirror became a vessel for the Housea's darkest memories. It was in that room, before that very glass, that a forbidden affair was revealed, leading to a violent confrontation that left the mirror cracked and a life abruptly ended. The servants who cleaned the room afterward refused to look directly into the glass. They said they saw fleeting figuresa faces that did not belong to them. Gestures frozen in time, eyes filled with grief or fury. Among themselves, they whispered that the mirror had become a window into the house's buried sins. Today, when visitors climb the narrow staircase to the top floor, they often pause before entering the room. The air feels heavier there, colder. The light seems weaker, as though drained by the mirror's presence. Some say they feel watched the moment they step inside. Others feel an inexplicable tightening in their chest, as though the room remembers every painful secret it once held. When someone stands before the mirror of betrayal, the reflection at first appears normal, just a dim rendering of themselves in the cracked glass. But linger long enough, and something begins to shift. Shadows flicker. A second figure appears behind the viewer, though no one else is in the room. Sometimes it is a servant from centuries past, dressed in a uniform long forgotten, their expression weary or frightened. Other times it is a member of the original family, their face pale, their eyes full of sorrow or anger. These figures do not move like ordinary reflections. They hover in place, locked in a moment that seems to replay only for those who watch. Witnesses report seeing entire scenes unfold in the broken fragments of the mirror. A woman sobbing silently while clutching a letter. A servant overhearing a heated argument through a cracked door. A man pacing with a glass of brandy, muttering threats under his breath. The images are faint, like impressions left behind by memories too heavy to fade. Some claim they see the moment the mirror cracked, a flash of movement, a violent gesture, a scream muffled by the thick stone walls. One visitor described seeing a woman's hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, as though she were trapped behind the glass. Another insisted he saw his own face shift into someone else's, his reflection replaced by a sorrowful servant who had died more than a century ago. When he blinked, the face snapped back, but the crack running through the mirror seemed to throb with a faint pulse, as though alive. There are darker experiences as well. Some people feel a sudden chill on their necks, followed by a whisper they cannot quite understand. Others sense someone standing very close behind them, breathing softly, even though the room remains empty. A few have even fled the room in a panic, convinced that if they didn't leave immediately, they would become part of the mirror's memory themselves. Caretakers who work in gray towers avoid the top floor unless absolutely necessary. They say the mirror shifts its moods. Some days it remains dormant, showing nothing but the cold reflection of the room. Other days it seems almost eager, drawing the eye toward the cracks, revealing flickers of the past even to those who don't wish to see. On stormy nights, when thunder shakes the old estate, the mirror seems to shimmer as though illuminated from within. It is on these nights, the caretakers say, that the betrayals replay most vividly, the past reaching out across the years. The room remains closed to the public most of the time, but those who have glimpsed the mirror of betrayal never forget it. They leave unsettled, haunted by images that do not belong to them, and burdened by a feeling that the mirror showed them something too real to be imagination. Gray Towers has many secrets, but none linger so powerfully as the reflections trapped in that cracked, ancient glass. For in every shimmer, in every flicker of movement, the mirror remembers the betrayals, the hidden affairs, and the tragedies that shaped the Mansiona's soul. And anyone who gazes into it may find themselves face to face with ghosts that still demand to be seen. Deep within the winding halls of Fonthill Castle, where handcrafted tiles cover nearly every surface, visitors often feel the unmistakable sense that the walls themselves are alive. Henry Chapman Mercer built his vast concrete masterpiece with passion, intellect, and an almost feverish devotion to the stories that shaped humanity. Every room, every stairway, every hidden alcove bears his tocha etched, pressed, and molded into thousands of ceramic tiles that depict myths, beasts, battles, ancient artisans, and forgotten worlds. But when night settles over the sprawling estate, these tiles seem to do more than simply display history. Some say they move. Others swear they watch. The tile spirits of Fonthill Castle are whispered about in hushed tones by staff and visitors alike. A legend woven into the very grout that binds the creations to the castle walls. It is said that Mercer poured so much of his energy, his obsessions, and his unrelenting imagination into his work that the tiles absorbed fragments of his mind. Now, they hold more than stories, they hold spirits. Those who walk the halls in the late afternoon, when the sun dips low and shadows stretch long across the castle floors, often describe the unsettling sensation that the painted eyes on the tiles are following them. A Leona-esque gaze shifts by a fraction. A medieval knight turns his head slightly toward the viewer. A mythological creature that once seemed static now looks ready to climb out of the wall. At first, visitors brush it off as a trick of the light or the power of suggestion. But then the whispers begin. Soft, drifting voices seem to float through the corridors, threading themselves between the towering shelves of the library and curling around the concrete columns of the great hall. The words are faint, just on the edge of comprehension. Some say the whispers sound like Mercer himself lecturing softly about history, art, and the power of creation. Others insist the voices belong to the long-forgotten subjects depicted in the tiles. Ancient soldiers calling out warnings, craftsmen murmuring instructions, or mythical beings uttering names lost to time. One caretaker described hearing a Childa-esque laughter echoing down a narrow staircase, even though no children were on the property at the time. The laughter faded into a series of distant footsteps, light and quick, like someone running barefoot along the concrete floors. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she found one of the tilesa, a simple mosaic fascia glowing faintly with a warm, amber light. Moments later, the glow vanished, leaving the tile cold and lifeless once more. In some rooms, the movements are far more dramatic. There are accounts of entire scenes shifting when no one is watching. A ship depicted in one tile panel appears closer to shore than it did moments earlier. A procession of medieval figures seems to have rotated slightly, as though they are turning to face whoever enters the room. These changes are subtle, never occurring in direct sight, but undeniable to those who know the castle well. Late at night, the castle seems to breathe. The air grows thick with an ancient energy, as though the past is trying to break through the concrete walls. Some visitors claim they hear chanting deep within the structure, old, rhythmic, almost ceremonial. Others hear scraping, as though tiles are shifting against one another, rearranging themselves into new patterns. At times, a deep thud reverberates through the floor, as though something heavy has stepped across the castle's foundation. And then there are the glowing eyes. In the dim light of evening, the eyes embedded in various tiles begin to shimmer. Not brightly, just enough to be noticed. A faint gleam, like moonlight reflecting off glass. One moment the eyes are dull and painted, the next they hold a spark of awareness. Guests have reported locking eyes with a tile face, only to feel a jolt of cold dread shoot through their body. Some describe sensing a presence behind the stare, a consciousness trapped within the ceramic form. Others feel a sudden wave of sadness, fear, or longing, as though absorbing the emotions of the spirit within. A historian once conducting after-hours research in the castle claimed he saw a set of tiled figures on the wall slowly lean toward each other, their previously static arms seemingly shifting. He fled the room, his notes scattered, swearing that the tiles had come alive. When he returned with staff, everything was still. The tile spirits seem most active in the room where Mercer spent many solitary nights designing and crafting his creations. The air there is colder, and the whispers are louder. Some visitors have felt a hand rest lightly on their shoulder while examining the tiles, only to spin around and find no one. Others see fleeting shapes in their peripheral visione, shadows darting across the walls, disappearing just before they can be fully seen. People who leave Fonthill often carry a lingering sensation with them, as though the castle's eyes are still watching. Some avoid looking at tiled surfaces for days afterward, unsettled by the feeling that something might be looking back. For Fonthill Castle is not merely a monument to art and imagination. It is a living archive of stories, emotions, and obsessions. Each tile holds a fragment of the past, and the tile spirits ensure that none of it is ever truly silent. In the castle's shifting shadows, the whispers continue, the eyes glow, and the stories embedded in ceramic move with a life all their own. The crypt of Glencairn is a subterranean chamber carved from stone, shielded from the sun and the outside world by thick walls and narrow passageways. Today, the crypt is shrouded in silence, but that silence is deceptive. Those who venture near its entrance often speak of faint footsteps echoing in empty halls. Distant chanting that rises and falls like the breath of the building itself. And a pulse of energy that seems to thrum through the stone, hinting at rituals long forgotten. The crypt was originally designed as a private space for meditation and family rites. It is not large, but the low ceilings and tight corridors amplify every sound, giving the impression of a space far more populated than it is. Some historians speculate that the crypt's architecture was intentionally designed to focus energy, to create a spiritual resonance that would guide and protect the Pitcairn family in their ceremonies. Whether by design or by consequence, the crypt today carries the imprint of generations, a lingering echo of prayers, chants, and whispered intentions. Visitors report an immediate change in atmosphere when entering the lower corridors. Sounds from the surfacia footsteps, conversations, the wind through the trees fade into nothingness. In their place comes a resonance, the soft scuff of distant shoes, the faint shuffle of movement, as though someone walks just out of sight. Many describe the sensation of being followed, though every glance into the shadows reveals nothing but empty stone. The chanting is perhaps the most disquieting phenomenon. It is subtle at first, almost imperceptibly a soft vibration at the edge of hearing. Those who stop to listen more closely hear rhythmic intonations, phrases blending into one another like a family of voices speaking in unison. The language is unfamiliar, though some believe it is drawn from ancient liturgical texts or perhaps private invocations used solely within these walls. Occasionally, the sound seems to rise in pitch or intensity, filling the chamber, only to vanish instantly when one attempts to approach its source. Guests have described moments when they can feel the vibrations in their chest and limbs, a tangible energy that resonates with something deep within themselves. Shadows in the crypt are another persistent phenomenon. Narrow corridors and archways create angles that distort perception, yet many who walk the passageways report seeing forms that do not belong. Figures drift along the walls or hover in alcoves, sometimes indistinct, sometimes clear enough to recognize the outline of a human figure. Some witnesses describe robed figures kneeling or gesturing as though performing rites, disappearing when approached. These visions are often accompanied by a sensation of being observed, the unmistakable feeling that unseen eyes track every movement. One visitor recounted descending the spiral staircase leading to the main chamber of the crypt. Halfway down, she heard the faint scrape of stone against stone, followed by a soft whisper that seemed to repeat her own name. When she paused, the sound ceased. As she continued, the whisper returned, this time layered with the faint hum of multiple voices chanting in unison. By the time she reached the chamber, a cold pressure had settled over her shoulders, as though unseen hands had pressed lightly, guiding her forward or warning her to leave. The central chamber itself is the heart of the crypt's energy. Simple in construction, with stone walls lined with niches and alcoves, it is easy to underestimate its presence. Yet those who enter often speak of a pulsing sensation that rises from the floor and vibrates through the walls. Some believe it is residual energy from generations of family rituals. Others suggest the crypt has become a conduit for spiritual forces, a place where the boundary between the living and unseen is thin. Candles or modern lighting seem to have little effect on the feeling, as though the energy is independent of human attempts to illuminate it. Hidden alcoves and narrow passageways add to the crypt's unsettling aura. A few contain stone basins or carved symbols, their original purpose unknown, their edges worn smooth by centuries of use. It is in these corners that many report the most direct experiences. Cold touches on the skin, fleeting movements in peripheral vision, or whispers that seem to come from directly behind them. Some have left the crypt unnerved, convinced that the spirits of past family members linger, watching, guiding, or perhaps guarding their secrets. Despite the unease, the crypt is not malevolent. The energy is complex, simultaneously heavy and protective, mournful and reverent. It carries the weight of tradition, of rituals meant to honor the living and the dead, and of the spiritual obsessions that define the Pitcairn family. But for all who enter, it leaves an impression that cannot be shaken. Even when the sun rises and the castle above hums with ordinary life, the crypt remains a silent sentinel beneath the stone. Faint footsteps echo, the chanting drifts like a distant memory, and the pulsing energy hums quietly through the walls. It is a place where the past has never fully departed, where family rites linger, and where the spiritual heartbeat of Glencairn Castle can still be felt by those daring enough to descend into its hidden depths. Madison Orphanage Hall at Lindenwold stands as a silent witness to decades of laughter, tears, and the fleeting lives of children who once called its halls home. The hallways echo with sounds that are both familiar and unsettling. Footsteps on wooden floors, soft whispers drifting through corridors, and the quiet rustle of small hands moving through abandoned rooms. The attic is often described as the heart of the haunting. During its years of operation, it was a place where children stored toys, blankets, and personal belongings, a private sanctuary above the eyes of caretakers. Now it is a place frozen in time. Visitors who climb the narrow staircase leading to the attic report an immediate chill as the air grows noticeably colder, carrying with it the scent of old wood and dust. Shadows seem to stretch across the rafters, and at times people hear faint laughter, playful squeals, or the soft thud of feet running across the floor, as if the children's routines continue unseen. The hallways of the orphanage hold similar echoes of the past. Long after the building was emptied, the sounds of daily life remain. Footsteps fall in patterns reminiscent of children moving from dormitories to dining rooms, whispers rise and fade as if secrets are being shared, and doors creak open slightly, only to close again moments later. Whispers rise and fade as if secrets are being shared, and doors creak open slightly, only to close again moments later. Some visitors swear that the echoes follow them from room to room, maintaining the rhythm of routines practiced for decades. One former caretaker described walking down a hallway at night and hearing the unmistakable sound of children lining up for supper. The shuffling feet and murmured conversations so vivid that she felt compelled to pause and listen, as though stepping into a moment from the past. Shadows are among the most unsettling elements of the haunting. Many are fleeting, seen only in the corner of Oni's eye, while others appear more deliberate, holding a shape that suggests a small figure moving slowly along the hall. Guests often feel an invisible presence standing close by, brushing past their shoulders or moving just behind them. These interactions are never violent, but they carry an undeniable sense of attention and awareness, as if the children are replaying moments of their lives, unaware that they no longer inhabit the material world. The sound of toys moving on their own is another common phenomenon. Old wooden blocks, dolls, or toy animals sometimes seem to shift slightly when no one is watching. Some visitors report the soft tap of a rocking horse swaying back and forth in the attic, though the room is still. The effect is subtle, almost gentle, but it contributes to the feeling that the past is not gone. One guest described a small, faded doll appearing upright in a corner where it had previously been lying flat, its glass eyes catching the dim light as if observing her. Even in the dormitories, where rows of beds once held children through long nights, the echoes persist. Some say they hear the gentle creaking of bed frames, soft whispers shared between children, or the low murmur of someone recounting a story. Others report sudden cold spots near the beds, moments when the air seems to press against their skin with a weight that cannot be explained. These sensations are strongest in the late evening, when the orphanage is empty and the natural sounds of the world fade, leaving only the resonance of memory and presence. The main hall itself is often described as thick with emotional energy. Visitors report an overwhelming feeling of sadness mixed with fleeting warmth, as if the echoes of laughter are intertwined with the lingering sorrow of lives shaped by hardship. Footsteps and whispers seem to move in patterns familiar to the children who once lived there. The shuffle of feet toward the dining room, the tap of hands along banisters, the whispered calls of friends checking in with one another. Some believe that these echoes serve as a reminder, a way for the spirits to maintain their presence, keeping the memories of their lives alive within the mansion's walls. Caretakers and tour guides who have spent time in the building often stress that the haunting is not malevolent. The children's spirits seem attached more to memory than to anger or vengeance. Their presence is a reflection of the lives they lived, the routines they followed, and the bonds they formed. Many guests leave with a sense of reverence, touched by the persistence of these young souls, and haunted by the traces of their daily existence that remain embedded in every hallway and attic corner. Even today, Lindenwold's Madison Orphanage Hall holds a powerful energy that speaks to anyone who walks its floors. The shadows linger where sorrow once lived, the echoes of footsteps and laughter trace invisible paths through its rooms. The whispered voices of children long gone continue to replay the routines of decades past. Those who enter are reminded that while time may erase the living, memory and presence endure. etched into the walls, floors, and attics of this storied orphanage. Mercer's library at Fonthill Castle is unlike any other room in the sprawling handcrafted estate. Nestled deep within the walls of Henry Chapman Mercer's creation, the library holds a collection of books as vast and intricate as the castle itself. Leather-bound volumes, some centuries old, line towering shelves, their spines worn smooth from hands long gone. Each book seems to radiate a quiet authority, a sense that knowledge and memory are not simply stored here, they linger, breathed into the very air. Yet it is not only the books that command attention. It is the atmosphere of the library that holds the true power. Visitors speak of a presence that transcends the ordinary, of corners and stacks that feel alive, of whispers that drift like leaves on a hidden breeze. The most common phenomenon is the books themselves. Many report that volumes open on their own, their pages flipping as if guided by invisible fingers. Some describe reaching for a book only to find it already resting in their hands, open to a chapter that seems eerily relevant to their thoughts or fears. Others have watched in astonishment as a shelf shudders subtly, a single tome sliding forward without touch, the sound echoing faintly in the cavernous space. It is a quiet, deliberate movement, never chaotic, as if the library itself chooses who may read and when. At first, visitors may think the sounds are simply the castle settling, the wind through cracks in the walls, or the shuffle of their own footsteps on stone floors. But those who listen closely recognize the cadence of language words forming, phrases lingering for a heartbeat before fading away. Some claim to hear names called, questions asked, or discussions carried on in languages long forgotten. The whispers are not threatening, but they are persistent, demanding attention, pulling the visitor deeper into the labyrinthine rows of books. Corners of the library seem particularly active. Shadows flicker where none should exist, caught on the edge of peripheral vision. A visitor standing at one end may feel an unseen gaze pressing lightly against the back of their neck, or sense a presence hovering just beyond a nearby bookshelf. Some report seeing figures moving slowly among the stacks, slender silhouettes that vanish when approached, leaving only the faint smell of old parchment and candle wax in their wake. Others describe fleeting reflections in glass cabinets, figures that do not correspond to anyone in the room, shapes that linger just long enough to unsettle the observer. Others describe fleeting reflections in glass cabinets, figures that do not correspond to anyone in the room, shapes that linger just long enough to unsettle the observer. One longtime caretaker recounted an experience that has become almost legendary among those who work at Fonthill. Late one evening, he had stayed behind to catalog a newly acquired collection. The room was quiet, lit only by a single gas lamp. As he bent to open a large folio on a reading table, the pages rustled violently on their own, flipping back and forth. When he straightened, he felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. And when he glanced toward a shadowed alcove, he swore he saw a woman in Victorian dress. Visitors have reported that the library seems to respond to their presence in uncanny ways. A question thought silently may be answered with a book opening to a relevant page. Anxiety or fear can be mirrored in sudden chills and soft exhalations in the corners. Even footsteps feel weighted, as if something unseen is walking alongside, keeping pace. The library, it seems, is aware. It does not confront, it observes, guides, and on occasion, interacts in ways that defy natural explanation. At times, the energy in Mercer's library is almost palpable. The air can feel thick, charged with the cumulative knowledge and presence of centuries. Some claim to sense a rhythm in the whispers, a pattern in the flickering shadows, as though the spirits inhabiting the room are replaying their own routines, maintaining a life of their own within the space. The room becomes a living organism, with breathing walls, whispering books, and watchful eyes embedded in the gloom. The library is particularly active near Mercer's own study area. Here, the tiles underfoot are mosaics of intricate designs, and the shelves are packed with his personal notes and collections. Many visitors report a sudden intensification of phenomena in this part of the room. Books opening with greater frequency, whispers louder and more coherent, shadows lingering longer. Some believe that Mercer himself, or the energy of his obsessions, remains tied to these volumes, to ensure that the knowledge, secrets, and passions he poured into his work remain alive and present. Despite its unsettling nature, Mercer's library is not a place of danger. The spirits and energies here seem bound to observation, to repetition, to the quiet care of knowledge itself. Those who spend time here often leave with a lingering awareness, a feeling that the library has acknowledged them, that it has shared a fragment of its memory or chosen them as witness to its persistent presence. Books open by themselves, whispers drift through the stacks, and shadows flit along corners, watching with patient, unseen eyes. Beneath the sprawling Gothic architecture of gray towers lies a hidden network of passages known as the Arcadia Tunnels. Built to serve practical purposes of moving supplies, accessing secret chambers, and connecting distant wings of the Estetia. These tunnels now carry a reputation far darker than their original intent. Visitors who descend into the stone corridors often describe an unsettling atmosphere, as if the air itself remembers footsteps long vanished. Conversations whispered in fear, and the weight of secrets too heavy to surface. The entrance to the tunnels is unassuming, hidden behind a false wall in the Estetia's lower wing. A narrow stairwell leads down into darkness, where the temperature drops sharply and the scent of damp stone dominates the senses. The further one descends, the heavier the air becomes, filled with a tension that is almost tactile. The silence is deceptive. Beneath the stillness lies the faint echo of footsteps, uneven and sporadic, as though someone is pacing just out of reach. Some claim the echoes are merely acoustics, amplified by stone walls, yet the pattern is often too deliberate to be coincidental. Whispers float through the corridors, carried on a current that seems to have no source. They are not constant, but when they appear, they are unmistakably soft, hurried, sometimes indistinct phrases that brush against the ears of those walking alone. Visitors describe hearing snatches of conversation from centuries past, warnings given in hushed tones, arguments that dissolved into pleading, or instructions repeated over and over as if guiding unseen travelers. Some of the whispers feel almost urgent, pushing the living to move along, while others linger like a memory of someone waiting in vain. Figures are reported throughout the tunnels, though they vanish the instant one turns to confront them. Shadows flit along walls, corners, and arches, often caught in peripheral vision. Some appear as vague outlines, mere silhouettes against the dim glow of a lantern, while others briefly take the shape of a person walking purposefully through the passage. Those who attempt to follow them invariably find the space empty. A single glance back may reveal the same figure vanished, leaving only the cold air and the lingering echo of movement. One tour guide recounted a particularly unnerving experience. Descending with a small group of visitors, he paused in a junction where 3 tunnels converged. He swore he saw a man in period attire stepping from one corridor into another. The figure's back was straight and his stride purposeful, yet he disappeared when the guide blinked, leaving no trace except a faint cold spot where he had last stood. Moments later, the group heard a soft shuffle, as if Summonia or somethinga was moving through the tunnels parallel to them, following unseen footsteps that seemed to anticipate their own. The tunnels themselves are a labyrinth of stone, narrow corridors, low arches, and occasional stairwells that descend into deeper recesses. Many visitors report feeling an oppressive sense of being watched, a perception of eyes tracking them from the darkness. Even experienced spelunkers unfamiliar with gray towers describe the sensation as different from any ordinary underground structure. The walls appear to absorb the movements of those who pass through and reflect them back in whispers, shadows, and the faint echo of footsteps. Some corners are particularly active. Small alcoves or hidden chambers sometimes carry the clearest activity. A cold breath against the neck, a faint tap of a hand along the wall, or a whisper so close it feels as if spoken directly into the ear. A historian exploring the tunnels alone once described feeling a hand brush his arm, although no one else was present. When he turned, a shadowy figure moved through an archway and disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sound of its footsteps fading into stone. The sound of its footsteps fading into stone. Footsteps vary in weight and pace, sometimes sounding like hurried running, other times slow and measured. Whispers echo in sequences, often repeating themselves as if rehearsed over decades. Some believe these sounds are residual energy, replaying the passage of servants, guests, or even family members long dead, trapped in the tunnel's narrow confines. Others suggest that the tunnels themselves have absorbed the emotions of their inhabitants, creating an echo chamber of fear, urgency, and curiosity that continues to resonate. Lighting seems to affect the phenomena. Candles, lanterns, or flashlights occasionally catch fleeting images of figures or glints in the corners of the tunnels, but these often vanish when one focuses directly on them. Darkness amplifies the sensation of being accompanied. Visitors frequently report that the longer they remain below, the stronger the feeling of unseen presence becomes. Some describe a tangible pressure, a sensation that someone is walking just behind or alongside them, invisible but undeniably close. Despite the fear these experiences evoke, there is a sense that the tunnels are not malevolent. The spirits or echoes seem bound to the space itself, replaying moments of the past or lingering as witnesses to history. The Arcadia tunnels are a repository of memory, carrying the whispers, footsteps, and vanished figures of generations who lived and moved through gray towers. To walk them is to step into a place where the past never fully fades, where the walls remember every step, and where shadows and whispers remain as reminders of lives that once navigated these hidden passages. Even when the surface of gray towers is quiet, the tunnels pulse with the remnants of the past. Footsteps echo, whispers float between walls, and figures vanish into darkness, leaving those who enter with the unmistakable impression that the estate's history is still alive below, forever replaying in the Arcadia tunnels. Namaquelan Chapel, tucked within the grounds of Namaquelan Castle, is a place where silence is heavy and the air carries a weight that seems older than the stone walls themselves. Built centuries ago as a place of reflection and devotion, the chapel has long been a site where faith, fear, and mystery intertwine. Visitors speak of inexplicable phenomena: candles that ignite without flame, whispered prayers drifting through the nave, and cold drafts that move across the empty pews as if an unseen congregation remains present. The chapel is no longer just a structure of worship. It is a vessel of lingering energy, a space where the past and the present brush against each other with quiet insistence. Stepping inside, one immediately notices the subtle chill that clings to the air. Even on warm days, the interior feels markedly colder, a cold that is not simply the absence of heat, but something more deliberate, as if the walls themselves exhale. Candles, often placed along the altar or in small sconces lining the side aisles, sometimes ignite spontaneously. Visitors have reported seeing the soft glow of a candle flicker to life moments after they entered, despite all being extinguished earlier. The flames burn steadily, illuminating the chapel in warm light, yet there is no logical explanation for their sudden appearance. Some say the candles are a response, a silent invitation from the spirits who linger here. Whispered prayers are another common experience. They drift through the nave in patterns that mimic human devotion: low, hurried murmurs, the rise and fall of supplication, sometimes a full sentence repeated as if in persistent insistence. Those who hear them often feel compelled to listen, sensing that the whispers are not random but purposeful. Occasionally, a visitor will feel the words brush against their consciousness, coherent but fleeting, a call to attention, a plea, or a quiet blessing. The voices seem to originate from no particular point, spreading evenly throughout the chapel, yet the effect is intimate, as if one is sharing a moment with the unseen. Cold drafts move through the pews and along the stone floors in unpredictable ways. They are sudden and sharp, brushing across the skin as if an invisible presence has passed by. Some describe the sensation as gentle, like a hand lightly tracing the arm, while others feel a stronger, more insistent force that urges them to move or pause. The drafts do not follow natural air currents. They defy the ordinary physics of wind, passing through closed doors, disappearing, and then returning moments later in another area. For many, this sensation creates a deep awareness that the chapel is still inhabited, not by living parishioners, but by those who remain tied to the space in ways unseen. One visitor recounted kneeling in prayer at the front pew, feeling a sudden warmth on their shoulder that could not be attributed to sunlight or other visitors. As they bowed their head, they heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable, "A peace be with you." When they lifted their head, the chapel was empty, and the warmth had vanished, leaving only the sensation that the presence had remained just long enough to be acknowledged. Moments like these are reported frequently, though they vary in tonia, sometimes comforting, sometimes somber, always insistent that the chapel is more than stone and mortar. The altar is perhaps the most potent point of activity. Candles along its surface often flicker without wind, and shadows along the walls seem to twist and move in rhythm with invisible figures kneeling or standing in devotion. Some visitors swear they see fleeting shapes behind the stained glass windows, ghostly silhouettes that vanish when one turns to look directly. These experiences are not frightening in a violent sense, but they carry an emotional weight, an acknowledgement of the countless lives that have passed through Namaqualand Chapel, each leaving a fragment of themselves behind. Even the architecture seems to encourage awareness of the unseen. These experiences are not frightening in a violent sense, but they carry an emotional weight, an acknowledgement of the countless lives that have passed through Namaqualand Chapel, each leaving a fragment of themselves behind. The high vaulted ceilings, intricate carvings, and narrow alcoves create pockets where sound and shadow converge. A whispered prayer may echo multiple times, each repetition carrying a slightly different tone, as if multiple presences are speaking in tandem. Shadows appear to linger longer than natural light permits, creating the impression that someone, or something, is waiting patiently in the corners, observing without movement. Despite the passage of time, Namaqualand Chapel retains a remarkable sense of continuity. Visitors leave with the feeling that they have witnessed something eternal, a subtle interaction with the spiritual residue of centuries. The cold drafts, spontaneous candles, and whispered prayers form a quiet chorus that reminds all who enter that this is a space where the past endures. Those who are attuned may sense guidance, comfort, or even quiet admonition, as though the chapel itself participates in the acts of devotion that once defined it. Namaqualand Chapel remains a place of reflection, reverence, and mystery. Candles continue to ignite on their own, whispered prayers float through the nave, and cold drafts brush across empty pews, leaving no doubt that the presence of the past is still very much alive. Those who enter find themselves walking among echoes of devotion, watched by unseen eyes, and touched by moments that refuse to fade, where faith, memory, and the supernatural intersect beneath the vaulted ceilings of this sacred space. Watched by unseen eyes, and touched by moments that refuse to fade, where faith, memory, and the supernatural intersect beneath the vaulted ceilings of this sacred space. Touched by moments that refuse to fade, where faith, memory, and the supernatural intersect beneath the vaulted ceilings of this sacred space. Where faith, memory, and the supernatural intersect beneath the vaulted ceilings of this sacred space. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of this sacred space. The basement of Fonthill Castle is a place that most visitors enter with hesitation, drawn by curiosity but tempered by a deep, instinctive unease. Henry Chapman Mercer, the Caslia-esque creator, built the basement with the same meticulous care and obsessive attention to detail that defines the rest of his sprawling concrete masterpiece. Yet here, in the low-ceilinged chambers beneath the castle, the air feels heavier, charged with a lingering energy that has endured long after Mercer's death. Symbols etched and inlaid into the walls glow faintly in the dark, casting dim, shifting patterns across the rough concrete. Casting dim, shifting patterns across the rough concrete. Footsteps echo in corridors where no one walks, and a sense of being watched pervades every corner. The basement is not merely a foundation. It is a repository of obsession, memory, and perhaps something more elusive. The moment a visitor steps down the narrow stairs leading into the basement, the atmosphere changes. The temperature drops sharply, and the air carries the faint smell of damp stone and clay. Shadows stretch and shift unnaturally across the floor and walls, and every sound of the scraping of shoes on stone, the soft hum of the castle above you seems amplified, resonating through the vaulted chambers. Many first-time explorers report a sensation of being followed, though each glance into the dim corners reveals nothing but the thick, lingering darkness. One of the most striking features of the basement is the glowing symbols scattered along the walls. Mercer, a man obsessed with history, mythology, and the power of the handmade object, embedded patterns, runes, and cryptic designs into the concrete surfaces. During the day, they are subtle, almost blending into the texture of the walls. But as night falls or the lights fade, the symbols seem to awaken, radiating a faint phosphorescent glow. Visitors have described the effect as hypnotic, the designs seeming to pulse, shift, or even breathe. Some say the symbols respond to presence, glowing brighter when someone pauses nearby or staring into them for too long. Footsteps are a constant phenomenon. Even when the basement is empty, faint thuds and scuffing sounds ripple through the corridors. They vary in weight and pace, sometimes hurried, almost frantic, other times slow and measured, deliberate. Visitors have reported hearing footsteps ascending the stairs behind them, though no one is there. Others hear multiple sets of steps in different directions, as if several unseen figures traverse the corridors at once, their movements perfectly synchronized yet intangible. Some speculate that these echoes are Mercer himself, replaying his nightly routines, checking on his work, or pacing as he contemplated the intricate world he had created. Whispers occasionally rise from the shadows, soft and almost indistinguishable at first. Some are brief, indecipherable murmurs. Others form coherent phrases, though their meaning is cryptic. Words like a look, a remember, a or a follow a drift through the air, felt more than heard, as if the walls themselves are communicating. A few visitors have reported the sensation of breath on their necks, though no one is present, while others feel a sudden chill, a coldness that seems to concentrate around the glowing symbols. The layout of the basement contributes to its unnerving nature. Alcoves and hidden recesses create pockets of shadow that distort perception, making the space feel far larger than it actually is. Visitors report that movement within the basement can feel disorienting, as if the corridors subtly shift or extend beyond their architectural limits. Figures have been glimpsed at the edge of vision, standing still or pacing, vanishing when directly looked at. Objects sometimes behave in ways that defy explanation. Tools and tiles may be found in slightly different positions than when last seen. A tile pressed into a pattern may tilt or shift without physical contact. Some guests have reported a faint vibration through the floor, rhythmic, almost like the heartbeat of the basement itself. It is as if the basement is alive, a vessel of Mercer's energy, replaying his obsessions and memories for anyone who dares to observe. Despite the unsettling phenomena, there is a strange sense of reverence in the basement. The glowing symbols, the whispered voices, the echoing footsteps all feel tied to Mercer's passion and genius rather than malice. Visitors often leave with the impression that they have witnessed not a haunting in the traditional sense, but an enduring imprint of a man's life and obsessions, encoded into the very fabric of the castle. The basement seems to demand recognition of this history, a quiet acknowledgement of the dedication, the isolation, and the brilliance that shaped it. Even when the castle above is quiet, the basement hums with hidden energy. Symbols glow faintly on the walls, footsteps echo through the empty corridors, and the air pulses with the lingering presence of Mercer's obsessions. To walk through Fonthilla's basement is to step into the mind of its creator, to witness the persistence of passion beyond death, and to feel the subtle, persistent consciousness of a place that has never truly been empty. And private lives of the Pitcairn family. Built in Gothic splendor, this part of the estate is rarely visited by casual guests. The architecture itself is imposing, vaulted ceilings, tall windows etched with intricate patterns, and long hallways that seem to fold into shadow. Shadows are the most immediate and persistent presence in the East Wing. They drift along walls and across empty chambers with an almost deliberate grace, twisting and stretching in ways that defy natural light. Observers often report seeing shapes pause at doorways, vanish when approached, or linger just long enough to feel observed. These shadows are not malevolent, yet they carry an undeniable weight, as if infused with the essence of those who once moved through these spaces. Many claim the effect is strongest near windows where light casts elongated forms across the polished floors, creating the impression of figures frozen in time. The voices that fill the East Wing are subtle but unmistakable. Soft murmurs of prayer rise from corners, echo faintly in hallways, and occasionally seem to gather in one of the private chambers. The prayers are not always coherent. Sometimes they are half-formed phrases, snippets of devotion or contemplation that repeat endlessly. A visitor may hear the cadence of the Pitcairn Familia's daily ritualsa, the intonation of recited psalms, the quiet repetition of invocations, the rhythmic murmurs of reflection. It is as if the Familia's spiritual past has been woven into the very air, replaying continuously for anyone sensitive enough to hear. Many who explore the East Wing report the sensation of presence without substance. Doors, though closed, may seem to breathe with movement, and faint drafts sweep across rooms even when windows are shut tight. The temperature shifts suddenly, a warm one moment, icy the next, especially near corners or along long corridors where shadows concentrate. Visitors often describe a feeling of being accompanied, a gentle awareness that follows them through the halls, observing their movements, and yet never intruding directly. It is a presence that mirrors the private devotion of the family, watching and repeating rituals long since completed in life. One former caretaker recounted an experience that has since become part of Glencairn lore. While performing maintenance late one evening, she ventured into the east wing alone. As she walked through a long corridor, she heard a soft chorus of whispers rising from the chamber at the end. When she approached, the voices faded, replaced by the faint scrape of footsteps echoing behind her. Turning, she saw nothing, yet the sensation of unseen eyes following her persisted until she exited the wing. Moments like these, repeated by others, have led many to believe that the East Wing is a space where memory and devotion linger, preserved in ways beyond ordinary understanding. The private rooms along the East Wing are particularly active. Bedrooms, studies, and meditation chambers retain traces of the Pitcairn family's personal and spiritual lives. Visitors describe glimpses of movement in the corner of the Aya curtains fluttering despite closed windows, the flicker of a shadow where no person stands. Some report hearing a quiet rustle of clothing or the soft movement of a chair, as if someone has just risen from it. These manifestations are never violent or aggressive. They are subtle, almost reverent, as though the spirits are replaying ordinary life infused with devotion. The architecture amplifies these phenomena. High ceilings and narrow alcoves create pockets of resonance where whispers linger longer, footsteps echo farther, and shadows multiply. Stone walls seem to store sound, returning it in slightly altered forms, creating the impression of a continuous, overlapping conversation. Visitors have described standing in a hallway and hearing prayers spoken in overlapping layers, as if centuries of devotion are converging in a single, unbroken echo. Even brief exposure to these sounds can leave an emotional impression, a deep awareness of the spiritual weight that permeates the wing. Candles and natural light also play a role in the East Wing's spectral atmosphere. Flickering candlelight seems to interact with shadows, elongating them, twisting them into shapes that resemble fleeting figures. At dusk, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows casts patterns that shimmer across walls and floors, occasionally creating the illusion of movement where none exists. Many who spend time in these rooms report a sense of calm mixed with melancholy, a quiet connection to the lives and devotions of those who inhabited them. Though the East Wing is rarely part of standard tours, those who venture there often leave with a profound sense of history and presence. The drifting shadows, repeating prayers, and subtle shifts in temperature and perception create a layered experience, one that blends memory, devotion, and the lingering energy of the Pitcairn family. The wing is not haunted in the traditional sense. It is inhabited by memory, by echoes of faith and private ritual, by a spiritual presence that refuses to fade. Even when the rest of Glencairn Castle is quiet, the East Wing continues its subtle performance. Shadows drift across empty rooms, soft voices of prayers repeat without end, and the energy of generations remains tied to the spaces they once filled. Visitors who step into these corridors often feel that they have crossed into a place where the past persists, where devotion and memory are woven into the very walls, and where the spiritual heartbeat of the Pitcairn family still resonates, guiding, observing, and remaining ever-present. The attic of Lindenwold Orphanage is a place where time seems to fold back on itself, carrying with it echoes of lives long past. Perched at the very top of the old Industrialista-S mansion, converted decades ago into a home for orphaned children. Sunlight rarely reaches its corners, leaving much of the space in dim shadow, and even during the day, visitors describe a palpable heaviness in the air, as though the very walls remember every cry, every laugh, and every whispered secret that once filled the rooms below. As one climbs the narrow staircase to the attic, the atmosphere shifts. The air grows cooler, carrying a faint draft that seems to swirl around the feet of those who enter. Old trunks, faded dolls, and scattered blocks occupy the space, their surfaces worn smooth by decades of tiny hands. These objects seem almost alive, their presence amplified by the memories they retain. It is here, among forgotten belongings and slanting beams, that the echoes of the past are most persistent. Visitors often report hearing laughter that has no source, high-pitched and fleeting, echoing as if children are running across the floorboards above. It is impossible to trace, sometimes circling the room or fading into silence only to return moments later. Occasionally, the laughter is joined by sobs, sharp or quiet, weaving together a tapestry of joy and sorrow that mirrors the complex emotional life of the orphanage. Those who pause and listen closely may also catch whispersa soft, indecipherable murmurs that seem to follow one from corner to corner, replaying conversations or prayers from decades past. The attic's layout enhances the uncanny feeling. Sloped ceilings create narrow passages that bend the eye, and small alcoves along the walls act as pockets where sound gathers and lingers. A simple whisper can multiply as it echoes through these corners, creating a layered effect as if multiple voices are speaking at once. Footsteps sometimes accompany the sounds of faint scuffing of shoes on worn wood, the tiptoe of children exploring the spacia, but when one turns to look, the floor remains empty. The effect is disorienting, a sensory reminder that the attic is more memory than material, more echo than reality. Old toys often play a subtle role in these hauntings. A doll may appear upright in a corner where it was previously lying down. A rocking horse might sway slightly though the room is still. Blocks or small wooden figures can shift just enough to be noticed by the observant eye. Some visitors have described the sensation of being watched while moving through the space, the tiny eyes of forgotten toys seeming to follow them in silence. These interactions are never aggressive. Instead, they create an uneasy familiarity, a sense that the children who once lived here are replaying their routines, still bound to the attic by memory. The children who once lived here are replaying their routines, still bound to the attic by memory. Those who spend time there often feel a mix of melancholy and warmth, a bittersweet awareness of the lives that were shaped in this small, shadowed space. The laughter and sobs do not belong to one child, but to many over decades, creating a layered history that is felt as much as heard. Visitors sometimes describe a tingling along the spine or a sudden awareness of being part of something larger, a connection to the emotional currents that continue to flow through the attic long after the children have grown or passed away. Some experiences are more direct. A visitor may kneel near an old trunk only to feel a sudden chill, or hear a whisper of their name. A laugh may ring directly in the ear, startling, yet not threatening. These moments are brief but intense, leaving a lingering impression that the attic itself is aware, responding subtly to those who enter. In many cases, it is not the specter of fear that dominates but the sense of presence, the feeling of being witnessed by lives long ended but not forgotten. The interplay of light and shadow contributes to the attic's eerie atmosphere. Slivers of sunlight filter through small windows, creating patterns that shift with the day. Shadows stretch across the beams and floor, occasionally resembling small figures moving in the corner of Oni's eye. The effect is fleeting, yet powerful, reinforcing the sensation that the attic is inhabited by more than just memories, that something of the children themselves still lingers in the beams, corners, and dust-laden air. Despite its unsettling qualities, the Lindenwold orphan attic is not a place of malice. The childrena's spiritsa, or the echoes of their presentia, seem attached more to routine and memory than to anger or harm. Visitors often leave with a sense of reverence, touched by the persistence of these young lives, and haunted by the traces of their existence that remain embedded in every creaking floorboard, old toy, and shadowed corner. Laughter echoes, whispers drift through corners, and soft sobs rise and fade, creating a layered soundscape that bridges decades. The objects remain, the shadows linger, and the atmosphere holds the weight of countless small lives once full of energy, curiosity, and sorrow. To enter the Lindenwold orphan attic is to step into a space where memory is alive, where the past never truly departs, and where the echoes of children long gone continue to inhabit the room, endlessly repeating moments from decades ago. The chapel at Castle Blood is a space that seems to exist between the living and the dead, where time slows and the weight of sorrow hangs heavy in the air. Originally constructed as part of the funeral home that preceded the castle, a place of solace and reflection. Over the years, however, it has become something more than a chamber where grief, memory, and lingering spirits converge, leaving an impression on anyone who dares to enter. Candles burn without flame, footsteps echo across empty floors, and the atmosphere itself carries a thick, almost tangible melancholy, as if the air remembers every act of mourning that ever took place here. Upon stepping inside, visitors often notice a drop in temperature, a sudden chill that seems to seep into the bones. The walls, lined with dark wood and faded stone, absorb sound, creating a quiet so deep that the faintest movement becomes magnified. Footsteps, for example, are never just footsteps in this chapel. They echo across the floor in measured, deliberate rhythm, sometimes pacing as if someone is walking back and forth, and yet when observers look around, the pews are empty. The candles are among the most eerie phenomena in the chapel. Small votives arranged along the altar or in wall sconces often appear lit even when there is no flame, their soft glow casting shadows that flicker without wind or movement. Visitors describe the light as warm but uncanny, illuminating the edges of the room in a way that makes the shadows appear almost alive. Sometimes, the glow brightens in response to presence, as though the spirits that linger are acknowledging those who have entered. These candles are not just decorative. They seem to hold memory and emotion, burning with an energy tied to sorrow, remembrance, and perhaps the unseen attendants of the chapel. Whispers drift through the space, barely audible yet impossible to ignore. At times, they seem to be reciting prayers soft, hurried, and almost inaudible. Other times, they are murmurs of lamentation or fragments of conversations from days long past. The whispers are layered, overlapping, creating the sensation of multiple presences speaking at once. Some visitors have reported that the voices seem to respond to their own movements, rising when they pause and fading when they attempt to listen more closely. As if the chapel itself is conscious and aware of the living who trespass into its sacred sorrow. Long aisles of polished wood, shadowed alcoves, and vaulted ceilings create corridors of sound and light that distort perception. A figure glimpsed out of the corner of an eye may vanish when looked at directly, while shadows stretch and twist along the walls, forming shapes that appear human in form. Some claim to see fleeting images of mourners, kneeling in reverence or weeping quietly, who disappear as soon as attention is focused on them. Even the pews seem to carry energy, with some visitors reporting the impression of invisible weight pressing down where no one is seated. Sorrow permeates the chapel in a way that is almost tangible. The air is thick, dense with emotion, as if decades of grief have condensed into a quiet, oppressive presence. Those who spend time within the space often describe an emotional heaviness, a sudden welling of empathy or sadness that is not their own, yet feels intimately familiar. Some have noted that lingering too long can induce a sense of melancholic disorientation, a feeling that the boundary between past and present has blurred. Footsteps remain the most persistent manifestation. They pace across the floor in ways that mimic human behavior but defy explanation. Some follow a predictable rhythm, pacing back and forth along the central aisle, while others move in erratic patterns, suggesting the presence of multiple entities. Often, the sounds are accompanied by other subtle phenomena, a distant creak of the pews, a soft exhale of air that brushes past the face, or the faint impression of a hand hovering nearby. These occurrences are never violent, but they are intimate, creating the sensation of being watched, accompanied, or acknowledged by unseen observers. Visitors have described moments of profound stillness punctuated by sudden, inexplicable events. A candle may flare, a shadow may stretch toward the center of the room, or a whisper may become distinct enough to be understood, offering a word of warning, a plea, or a fragment of remembrance. These moments are brief but powerful, leaving a lingering awareness that the chapel is alive with residual energy, replaying memories and emotions bound to the space long before the living walked its floors. Despite the intensity of these experiences, the chapel is not malicious. The presences seem bound to sorrow and memory, echoing the grief of lives once mourned here, rather than seeking to harm. Visitors often leave with a heavy heart, but also a sense of reverence, recognizing the depth of emotion preserved in the air, the shadows, and the flickering candlelight. Castle Blood's chapel is a place where the past persists, where grief has taken form, and where every whisper, shadow, and echo serves as a reminder of the enduring presence of sorrow. Candles burn without flame, footsteps cross floors where no living soul walks, and sorrow lingers like a thick fog. In Castle Blood Chapel, grief has found a permanent home, replaying endlessly, quietly, and insistently, inviting all who enter to witness the weight of the past and the invisible hands that still move through the sacred space. The servants' quarters at Namaqualand Castle are among the most haunting spaces in the sprawling estate, hidden away from the grandeur of the main halls, yet resonating with a presence that is impossible to ignore. These modest rooms, once bustling with the lives of those who kept the castle running, now stand silent, yet their silence is deceptive. Each corridor, each narrow room, holds echoes of the past, replaying routines that have long vanished from the world above. The air is cooler here, tinged with the faint scent of aged wood and stone, and the narrow hallways amplify every sound. Footsteps on the worn floors carry unnervingly far, sometimes echoing back before the visitor has even moved. Some guests report hearing the rhythmic sounds of broom bristles sweeping across stone, the soft clatter of dishes, or the faint rustle of linens being folded, sounds that belong to another era, yet feel astonishingly immediate. No matter how carefully one searches, there is never anyone visible, only the suggestion of movement in the shadows and the lingering evidence of activity. The shadows themselves are the most striking phenomenon. They are not always complete figures. Sometimes they are fragments, partial outlines of heads, shoulders, or hands, flickering across walls and corners as if caught between dimensions. At other times, full silhouettes appear, moving with deliberation, performing tasks as if replaying the exact routines that define the servants' lives. Some guests describe seeing a figure methodically polishing silver, pausing briefly as if sensing an observer, then continuing without acknowledgement. Others report shadows bending over stoves, stirring pots, or arranging chairs in perfect alignment, always precise, always purposeful, yet completely intangible. Whispers accompany the shadows, subtle and indistinct at first. The murmurs rise and fall, like conversations half-remembered, snippets of instructions, or quiet remarks exchanged among coworkers long dead. Visitors often describe the words as fragments of guidance. A place at Hiria, a don't a tea forget the linensa, a or a hurry, it must be ready. A. These whispers seem tied directly to the Shadowsa movements, reinforcing the illusion of life that persists in the quarters. The effect is immersive, as if the rooms themselves are replaying not just the sights but the sounds, the cadence, and even the rhythms of daily life that once sustained the castle. The layout of the quarters amplifies these effects. Narrow hallways, low ceilings, and small interconnected rooms create pockets of sound and shadow where the echoes seem to gather. In some areas, footsteps or whispers overlap, producing the impression of multiple figures working in tandem, moving through tasks unseen by the living. Alcoves and stairwells provide perfect vantage points for shadowy figures to appear, pause, or vanish entirely, leaving the observer with the unsettling awareness that life in the quarters continues unseen. Objects in the rooms occasionally display subtle signs of activity. A folded piece of linen may appear slightly unfolded, a broom or mop may shift position, and chairs or stools may tilt as though recently used. Some visitors have described the sensation of a presence brushing past them while arranging objects or performing tasks. These movements are never aggressive. Rather, they feel ritualistic, as if the energy of past lives has been embedded into the environment, endlessly repeating routines that once structured every day in the castle. Temperature shifts are also common. Other areas may feel warmer, almost as if an invisible hand has passed by, leaving behind a faint sense of physical presence. These subtle changes reinforce the idea that the servant's energy remains bound to the quarters, replaying daily life in a loop that transcends death. Despite the haunting nature of the space, there is a sense of rhythm and continuity that makes it distinct from malevolent hauntings. The shadows are not threatening, they are focused on tasks, engaged in routines, and bound by patterns that persist long after the living servants have passed. The effect is eerie but also deeply human, a reminder of the countless lives spent sustaining the grand estate. Visitors often leave with an impression of having witnessed history in motion, a living memory captured in shadow, sound, and subtle movement. Even when the castle above is quiet, the Cervanza quarters remain active in their own way. Shadows continue to sweep the floors, fold linens, and move with purpose. Whispers echo across hallways, and the faint impression of presence lingers in every room. The quarters are more than abandoned spaces. They are a stage upon which the lives of the past continue to perform, trapped in a loop of existence long gone. To enter the servants' quarters is to step into that continuum, where the echoes of labor, devotion, and quiet diligence play endlessly, leaving an indelible mark on all who witness them. Namakoland's servants' quarters remain a testament to memory, labor, and the persistence of the human imprint, preserving fragments of the past. The observation deck of Grey Tower's castle perches high above the sprawling university campus, offering sweeping views of the surrounding landscape by day and a dark, foreboding panorama by night. Though the architecture is admired for its Gothic Revival elegance, the deck holds a reputation that has long unsettled visitors. At night, figures are said to appear along the turrets and parapets, standing motionless, watching silently. They vanish the moment anyone approaches, leaving behind only an inexplicable chill in the air, as if the night itself has exhaled a ghostly breath. Ascending the narrow stone staircase to the observation deck, the air grows colder and heavier with every step, carrying a faint scent of stone, moss, and distant rain. The high battlements create long, shadowed corridors where light and darkness mingle, and every footstep reverberates with amplified clarity. Even when the castle is empty, the sensation of being observed can be overwhelming. Those who linger near the turrets often feel the weight of unseen eyes, a quiet awareness that seems to trace their movements and measure their presence. Figures appear most often in the corners of vision, standing along the edges of the parapets or leaning against the stone walls. They are human-shaped but often indistinct, shrouded in shadow or cloaked in the dim light of moon and starlight. Sometimes they are alone, other times multiple figures seem to gather in clusters, silently watching the grounds below. The more one tries to look directly at them, the more elusive they become, fading gradually until nothing remains but a lingering impression of presence. The cold air left behind by these vanishing figures is a signature phenomenon. A sudden chill may rush across the deck, brushing past the skin like an invisible hand, but something more deliberate, localized, and almost sentient. Visitors often describe the sensation as a shiver that travels along the spine, leaving them aware that something unseen has been present. At times, the cold seems to gather near the parapets, concentrating in pockets where the figures were last glimpsed, lingering even after the space is empty. Occasionally, observers report hearing soft, indistinct noises accompanying the figures. Footsteps echo along the stone, though no one is walking. A whisper may drift across the deck, faint and incomprehensible, or a subtle rustle of fabric or armor may sound just beyond reach. The noises are never loud or threatening, but they reinforce the sense that the observation deck is not merely a vantage point, but a space where the past and the present intersect, where residual energy remains embedded in the stone. The Gothic design of Grey Towers enhances the haunting quality of the observation deck. Turrets rise sharply against the sky, their pointed spires casting elongated shadows that stretch across the battlements. Narrow walkways and crenellated walls create pockets where light and shadow mingle unpredictably, allowing figures to appear and vanish seamlessly. Visitors often report that the stone seems to absorb sound and light, bending perception and making it impossible to distinguish between a shadow and a presence. The effect is disorienting, fostering a sense of isolation and vulnerability even at the highest point of the castle. Some nights, the figurisa presence is so pronounced that they appear to mimic human behavior. Observers have reported seeing a silhouette lean over the edge to gaze at the grounds below. The silhouette turns its head as if to watch the approaching visitor. The silhouette gestures subtly a movement that suggests a ritualistic quality. The figures may be remnants of student servants or members of the Grey family. Yet no records can confirm their identities. All that remains is the persistent impression of silent watchers bound to the castle's heights. Even when the figures vanish, their presence lingers in other ways. There is a ritualistic quality to these movements, a repetition that suggests a loop of observation extending over decades, perhaps centuries. The cold air is accompanied by a feeling of weight, a quiet pressure that presses against the chest or brushes along the arms and face. Visitors often leave the deck with an acute awareness that the space is alive with history, observation, and memory. Some report sleepless nights afterward, haunted not by nightmares but by the awareness of unseen eyes, silently watching, and the brush of cold that followed them into emptiness. The observation deck of gray towers is not merely a place for viewing the landscape. Figures appear along the turrets, watching with patient, silent intent. They vanish when approached, leaving only cold air and the lingering sense of presence. Shadows move across the stone, whispers drift with the wind, and the deck retains the energy of centuries of observers, bound forever to the heights of this Gothic castle. Visitors who dare ascend the staircase and step onto the deck often leave changed, carrying with them the weight of the unseen watchers, the memory of cold air brushing against skin, and the knowledge that gray towers hold secrets that remain just beyond sight. The figures will continue their silent vigil, and the observation deck will remain a place where the past never fully releases its hold, where shadow and memory converge, and where anyone who looks closely might feel the gaze of watchers, who have existed long before Thema and will likely exist long after. The garden mazes of Fonthill Castle are a place where order and chaos coexist, where meticulously sculpted hedges hide secrets as old as the castle itself. By day, the labyrinths are admired for their geometric beauty, the precise lines of boxwood, and you creating a living puzzle that challenges the mind and delights the senses. But as evening falls and mist creeps across the grounds, the mazes transform. The atmosphere becomes charged with something intangible, something that defies explanation. Visitors often speak of whispers among the branches, shadows that twist unnaturally, and the unnerving sensation of being observed by unseen presences. Stepping into the maze, even in daylight, carries a subtle shift in perception. The high hedges block sound and sight, creating isolated pockets where footsteps echo and voices carry. As dusk deepens, the fog rolls in, clinging to leaves and roots, muffling familiar sounds while amplifying others. In this damp, gray light, even the smallest movement can seem amplified. Shadows appear in the corners of vision, elongated by the interplay of moonlight and mist, and a figure glimpsed momentarily may vanish the instant one turns to look. The mazes seem alive, responsive to the presence of visitors, as if the very plants themselves are aware of those who intrude upon their paths. Whispers are perhaps the most unnerving aspect of the Fonthill mazes. They rise unpredictably, sometimes close enough to feel like breath on the ear, at other times distant and almost indistinct, drifting from one section of the maze to another. Some guests hear fragments of conversation, soft admonitions, or quiet laughter, as if the ghosts of past visitors or servants are replaying moments long gone. Others report a chorus of voices that overlap, creating the impression of multiple entities moving through the fog simultaneously. These whispers rarely make sense. Instead, they contribute to a feeling of disorientation, as if the maze itself is replaying history, layering the past atop the present in sound and movement. Shadows move with a peculiar intent. Unlike ordinary shadows cast by light, these figures twist along the hedges, drifting around corners and into spaces that seem physically impossible. They appear human in form but lack substance, their edges soft and shimmering, as if the fog itself shapes them. Visitors have described shadows following them down narrow corridors, sometimes matching their movements step for step, other times diverging in strange, unpredictable ways. When confronted directly, the shadows vanish, leaving only the dense fog and the eerie sense that something unseen continues to watch. The design of the mazes seems to enhance these effects. Narrow passages funnel sound and restrict sight, while dead ends and loops create a subtle disorientation, making it easy to become lost in both the physical space and the impression of time itself. Faint noises, the rustle of leaves, or a snapping twig may seem amplified, causing visitors to mistake natural sounds for footsteps or movement. Even the plants contribute to the unnerving atmosphere. Their densely packed branches rustle without wind, and their shadows stretch unnaturally across the foggy paths, blending with the spectral forms that glide silently among them. Many report physical sensations that accompany the auditory and visual phenomena. A sudden chill may sweep through the corridor, brushing along the skin like an unseen hand. The air sometimes feels heavy, charged with static, as if the energy of the maze itself has thickened. A sense of presence, subtle but persistent, often accompanies the shadows and whispers, an awareness that unseen entities are near, observing and replaying fragments of lives that once moved through these pathways. Some visitors have experienced moments of startling clarity, brief glimpses of the past playing out in real time. A shadow may pause near an intersection, mimicking the posture of someone pausing to consider their path. A whisper might take the form of a warning, a phrase half understood that seems tied to choice or direction. Objects occasionally shift without explanation. A fallen leaf may appear neatly aligned, a stray branch seems purposefully moved, as though invisible hands maintain a routine, invisible yet persistent. Despite the unnerving sensations, there is an unmistakable artistry in the haunting of the mazes. The phenomena do not seek to harm. They replay history, memory, and presence, tied to the obsessive, handcrafted nature of Mercer's creation. Walking through the labyrinth is like stepping into a living memory, where whispers and shadows preserve fragments of lives, both the mundane and the extraordinary. Visitors leave with impressions that linger a heightened awareness of sound, movement, and shadowy, and a deep respect for the interplay of human presence and the energy that lingers long after those who built or wandered the mazes are gone. The Fonthill Garden mazes remain an ever-changing performance of light, fog, shadow, and sound. Whispers echo among fog-shrouded hedges, shadows twist and follow with silent intent, and the paths themselves seem to breathe with history. Even in the quietest hours, the labyrinths are alive, replaying fragments of lives and moments, a subtle reminder that some places are never truly empty. Those who enter may find themselves alone or perhaps accompanied by echoes of the past, unseen but ever present, moving silently through the misty corridors of Fonthill Castle. The secret hall at Glencairn Castle is a hidden corridor, tucked away from the grandeur of the main estate. Few visitors are permitted beyond its doors, yet those who have stepped inside speak of an atmosphere charged with unseen energy. The walls themselves seem to pulse, vibrating faintly with the echoes of lives long past, carrying the weight of centuries of devotion, ritual, and secrecy. Footsteps resonate across the polished stone floors, yet when observers glance around, the hallways are empty, and only shadows remain to accompany them. Entering the hall, one immediately senses the difference from the public areas of the castle. The temperature dips subtly, cooler than the surrounding rooms, with a faint draft that seems to wind along the corridor independently of any open windows or doors. The faint scent of old wood, stone, and waxed floors mixes with something indefinably a metallic tang, perhaps, or the lingering aroma of incense once burned in private ceremonies. The dim light filtering through small, stained-glass windows casts long, distorted shapes along the walls, and even the smallest movement seems to ripple through the space, creating shadows that twist and shift as if alive. Footsteps are the most persistent and unsettling presence. They echo clearly across the hall, precise and measured, sometimes pacing back and forth, at other times moving unpredictably. The sound seems responsive to human movement. Approach too quickly, and the echoes recede, pause, and they may grow louder, circling the room in irregular patterns. Visitors report a peculiar duality in the sound, a sense that multiple footsteps are moving simultaneously, even when only one person is present. It is as if the hall is replaying moments of the past, preserving the motions of those who once walked its corridors, and refusing to relinquish them entirely to silence. The walls themselves appear to hold energy. When touched, they feel cool and solid, yet there is an almost imperceptible vibration, a faint thrum that resonates under fingertips. Some have described seeing the stone and plaster subtly shift in the corner of their vision, as though the walls breathe with memory. In certain sections, visitors have reported seeing faint outlinesa shadows of figures pressed briefly against the surface, lingering just long enough to spark recognition before fading into the ambient darkness. These shapes are never fully formed, appearing and disappearing like smoke caught in a shaft of light. The hall is alive with subtle interactions beyond sight and sound. Many visitors report feeling a brush of air along their arms or necks, the unmistakable sensation of being touched, yet finding nothing when they turn. Chairs may creak as if someone has just moved them, small objects may shift imperceptibly, and the faint sound of murmured words sometimes rises from corners, distant yet intimate. The whispers are not coherent. They are fragments, syllables caught in repetition, like echoes of conversations, prayers, or rituals replaying endlessly. At times, the whispers combine with the footsteps, creating a layered symphony of presence that is at once eerie and profoundly human. The architecture enhances these phenomena. The hall is narrow and elongated, with vaulted ceilings and recessed alcoves that trap sound and shadow. Light interacts strangely with the space, casting long, distorted shapes along the walls that appear almost animate. Alcoves seem to harbor concentrated energy, where shadows gather and movement is felt but unseen. Even experienced visitors find that their perceptions of space and distance become unreliable. Corners appear closer or farther than they are, and doorways seem to stretch into the darkness. The emotional impact of the secret hall is significant. Those who linger describe a sense of being observed, not in hostility but in quiet attention. There is a presence here that is deeply attentive, replaying the lives and routines of those who once occupied the castle. Some have reported sudden waves of melancholy or inexplicable nostalgia, a connection to lives and memories that are not their own. The hall is a repository of human energia, ritual, devotion, and the private echoes of centuries, creating an almost tangible weight that presses on the senses. In rare moments, the hall offers glimpses of something more tangible. These moments are fleeting, yet unforgettable, leaving a sense that the hall is conscious, aware, and willing to engage in quiet communion with those who enter. Even when the phenomena are absent, the memory of presence lingers, the walls themselves retaining the energy of countless lives, footsteps, and whispers. The Glencairn Secret Hall is not merely a corridor. It is a space where memory persists, where the boundaries between past and present blur. Walls pulse with residual energy, footsteps echo in empty corridors, and unseen presences brush past those who dare to explore its depths. It is a place where the past refuses to stay buried, where the spiritual heartbeat of the Pitcairn family and the countless individuals connected to the castle continues to resonate, unseen but profoundly felt. Visitors leave with the Hala's presence embedded in their senses, carrying the quiet, persistent echo of life long gone, but never entirely departed. The iron gates of Lindenwold stand as silent sentinels at the entrance of the estate, tall and ornate, their black bars twisting into intricate designs that hint at both elegance and foreboding. By night, these gates take on a life of their own, moving in subtle, inexplicable ways, swinging open and shut without human touch, accompanied by curling mist and the faint impression of figures unseen. Visitors who approach after dark often speak of a presence that is palpable, guiding shadows through the fog and across the grounds, leaving a chill that lingers long after the gates close. As night falls, the estate becomes enveloped in darkness, and the creeping mist begins to form around the gates. It rolls along the ground, curling through the bars in thin, silvery streams, wrapping around the stone pillars, and stretching into the surrounding landscape. Those who venture near the gates report a sudden drop in temperature, the air thick with moisture and an intangible tension, as though the estate itself is holding its breath. The gates, unconnected to any visible mechanism, begin to sway gently or slam with sudden force, moving with a rhythm that seems almost deliberate, opening pathways for figures that no living person can see. Mist and shadow interact in ways that defy explanation. Shapes appear within the fog, tall and human-like, gliding along the pathway beyond the gates or lingering just beyond the swing of the bars. These figures never fully materialize, fading in and out with the shifting mist. Sometimes they seem to move with purpose, as if walking a path long familiar to them, tracing the old routes of children, staff, or visitors from decades past. At other times, they circle, looping back through the fog in a repetitive, ritual-like pattern, leaving the living to wonder if they are glimpsing a fragment of memory frozen in time. The sound of the gates adds to their eerie presence. The iron screeches softly as the bars move, a grinding whisper of metal on metal, punctuated occasionally by the louder clang of the gates slamming shut. Footsteps echo along the gravel paths beyond the estate, yet no one is visible. Observers often describe hearing multiple steps at once, moving in different directions, as though a procession of unseen figures is passing through. The noise is never chaotic, it carries a rhythm and pattern, as if the mist itself guides these presences, choreographing their movements in a silent ballet of shadow and stone. Those who linger at the gates report subtle physical sensations. A cold brush of air may pass across the skin, like a hand moving along an arm. The mist may curl around the legs, clinging for an instant before dissipating. Some visitors feel the unmistakable sensation of being watched, a quiet awareness that unseen eyes track their movements. The interplay of mist, shadow, and the movement of the gates creates an atmosphere that is immersive, almost tangible, leaving an impression of presence that persists long after the observer has stepped back onto solid ground. The history of Lindenwold contributes to the mystique of the gates. Once an industrialista-esque mansion, later an orphanage, the estate is steeped in memory and energy, much of it tied to children who lived, played, and perhaps even suffered within its walls. It is easy to imagine these spirits lingering, bound to the estate, their movements expressed in the swinging of gates and the drifting mist. The gates become a threshold, a liminal space where the living brush against the echoes of the past, guided by forces unseen yet intimately connected to the history of the property. Visual phenomena often accompany the swinging gates. Observers describe glimpsing shadows between the bars, shapes that appear to step in tandem with the mist or align with the rhythm of the gate's movement. Occasionally, a faint glow is seen behind the fog, a flicker of light that suggests lanterns or candle flames, though no source is present. These fleeting images enhance the sensation of motion and life beyond the visible, leaving visitors unsettled yet captivated, aware that something is passing through the estate unseen and untouchable. The gates seem to interact with the living in subtle ways. Some report that the swing of the bars follows their approach, opening as if to invite them in, only to close suddenly when they step too close. Others describe a sense of being guided along a path by the mist itself, a gentle tug toward corners of the grounds that reveal faint traces of movement or long-forgotten structures. The experience is at once unnerving and mesmerizing, a delicate balance between fear and fascination. The Lindenwold iron gates are more than just an entrance. They are a portal through which memory, energy, and the unseen converge. They swing open and shut without human touch, mist curls and shapes shift through the bars, and the quiet presence of invisible figures can be felt moving through the fog. Visitors leave with an indelible impression of the Estatia-esque restless history, the ghostly echoes of past lives. The ghostly echoes of past lives intertwined with every creak of iron and curl of mist. At night, the gates serve as a threshold to another world, one where shadows walk, memories persist. One where shadows walk, memories persist, and the boundary between the living and the unseen is as fluid and shifting as the fog itself. The basement of Castle Blood, once the heart of the funeral home that preceded the mansion, is a place where sorrow has accumulated over centuries, thickening the air with a weight that presses on every visitor. The stone walls are cold and damp, lined with alcoves and low ceilings that make the space feel both claustrophobic and infinite. The atmosphere is dense, as if grief itself has seeped into the very fabric of the basement, lingering long after the living have departed. Footsteps echo across the floors in patterns that seem deliberate, whispers drift through the corridors, and invisible hands brush past those brave enough to descend, leaving an icy chill that runs along the spine. Visitors immediately sense the difference from the grand rooms above. The temperature drops, a biting cold that penetrates even thick clothing, and the air carries the faint scent of aged stone and lingering incense. Every step reverberates, bouncing off walls and echoes that are both familiar and alien, creating the impression that others are walking alongside, even though the rooms appear empty. Entering the basement, visitors immediately sense the difference from the grand rooms above. The temperature drops, a biting cold that penetrates even thick clothing, and the air carries the faint scent of aged stone and lingering incense. Every step reverberates, bouncing off walls and echoes that are both familiar and alien, creating the impression that others are walking alongside, even though the rooms appear empty. The sound is never random. It is measured, deliberate, as though unseen presences are retracing centuries of funerary routines, replaying moments steeped in grief and ceremony. Footsteps are perhaps the most persistent and unnerving phenomenon, sometimes following visitors as they navigate the corridors, other times moving independently, circling corners, or retreating into shadows. The echoes are precise, unnaturally clear, and seem to carry a presence, a weight that hints at the countless souls who have passed through the basement over generations. Guests often describe the sensation that these footsteps are aware of them, attentive to their movements, marking a ritual of acknowledgement that is both intimate and terrifying. Whispers accompany the sounds of footsteps, rising from corners, alcoves, or the dark recesses beneath the ceiling beams. They are soft at first, indistinct murmurs that could be dismissed as the wind, until the words begin to take shape. Sometimes they sound like prayers, others like fragments of conversation, expressions of grief or solace, or even faint instructions once meant for those preparing the departed. Sometimes they sound like prayers, others like fragments of conversation, expressions of grief or solace, or even faint instructions once meant for those preparing the departed. Others like fragments of conversation, expressions of grief or solace, or even faint instructions once meant for those preparing the departed. Expressions of grief or solace, or even faint instructions once meant for those preparing the departed. Or even faint instructions once meant for those preparing the departed. Once meant for those preparing the departed. The whispers overlap in layers, creating a tapestry of sound that seems alive, as if the basement itself remembers and replays the emotions of every funeral, every sorrow, every silent goodbye that ever took place within its walls. Visitors frequently report sensations of touch. A sudden brush against an arm, a cold hand tracing along the neck, or a pressure on the shoulder gives the unmistakable impression of summonia or something passing close. These touches are fleeting but memorable, leaving goosebumps and a lingering awareness of presence. There is no malice in these interactions. Rather, they convey a continuity of memory, an insistence that the sorrow of the past remains tangible, waiting for acknowledgement. The basement seems to communicate in subtle, intimate ways, reminding visitors that grief does not fade in Tyrelia, it accumulates, settles, and waits. Narrow hallways lead to larger chambers, each lined with stone alcoves or storage for caskets and ceremonial tools. The low ceilings trap sound, creating pockets where whispers and footsteps overlap and distort, producing the impression of multiple presences moving simultaneously. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls, elongating with the flicker of lights or the movement of the few visitors brave enough to enter. Alcoves appear to harbor lingering energy, where the air feels heavier and the cold more acute. Every surface seems to absorb history, storing fragments of lives and emotions that cannot be released, no matter how much time passes above ground. The emotional impact of the funeral basement is profound. Those who linger report a sensation of melancholy, a sudden wave of empathy for lives and deaths long past. Some describe feeling as though they are being watched by countless unseen eyes, not with threat, but with expectation. The basement holds the echo of grief, preserving the rituals, the quiet despair, and the devotion of those who labored and mourned within its walls. The presence is deeply human, tied to the memories of those who have passed and the living who honor them. At times, fleeting apparitions appear. A shadow may take the shape of a mournful figure, kneeling or bending over an unseen coffin. A subtle shimmer in the corner of vision may hint at a person standing silently, their gaze fixed upon the visitor before vanishing. These glimpses are brief, yet they leave a lasting impression, reinforcing the sense that the basement is not simply abandoned, but alive with memory, emotion, and the residual energy of centuries of sorrow. Castle Blood's funeral basement is a repository of grief, memory, and the unbroken presence of lives long gone. Footsteps echo across empty corridors, whispers drift endlessly, and unseen hands brush past in the chilling cold. Visitors leave with the sensation that they have walked among the remnants of sorrow itself, touching a past that refuses to fade, lingering in shadow and stone, quietly and insistently demanding to be remembered. It is a place where the weight of grief endures, and the echoes of centuries continue their quiet, sorrowful vigil. These are the haunted castles and estates of Pennsylvania, where stone, shadow, and sorrow intertwine with colonial ambition, betrayal, and tragedy. If you ever walk through Nemacolin Castle, explore the tunnels of gray towers, or wander the garden maze of Fonthill, listen closely. Whispers, laughter, or footsteps may greet you as echoes of a past that refuses to rest. Thank you for joining this journey into darkness. Stay curious, stay bravia, and always listen to the whispers in the walls.